Not just a lost cause halfway house. I want a big green lawn that goes on. And a family that loves me, yeah, that would be so sweet. Lemonade in the shade and cold brew iced tea, yeah, I can picture it now. I'm gonna make it somehow. I wasted too much time trying to feed myself and trying to be like everybody else. Cause I thought what I wanted was be wanted by the wrong crap. That part of town going nowhere, hellbound. I'm chained to the same lame brain, wanna be daydream. Just a loser with a bad team, yeah, but that's all in the past now. I'm going fast now. I've been knocked down, kicked around, losing my footing all over town. Fell flat on my face right into the ground. I've been lost all my life, but I finally found out of the storm and into the clouds. I'm homeward bound, I was lost and found. Hoping that I'll be somebody one day. Not just a lost cause, nowhere town. I want a great big house with a loving spouse and kids that really love me, yeah, that would be so sweet. Lemonade in the shade and cold brew iced tea, yeah, I can picture it now. I'm gonna make it somehow. I've been knocked down, kicked around, losing my footing all over town. Fell flat on my face right into the ground. I've been lost all my life, but I finally found out of the storm and into the clouds. I'm homeward bound, I was lost and found. I've been knocked down, kicked around, losing my footing all over town. Fell flat on my face right into the ground. I've been lost all my life, but I finally found out of the storm and into the clouds. I'm homeward bound, I was lost and found.
Good evening, everybody. How you doing? A magical Wednesday stream. I'm here with God of Law. How you doing, mate?
Not too bad. You can just call me Dave or MLS. God of
That's
Law.
so
It's a
Dave.
little, it's a little highfalutin.
Well, I mean, you chose the fucking name. I don't know what to tell you.
Okay. For those who don't know me, it's been MLS making law simple for a while, and my original channel got yeeted. God of Law was actually a trolling channel I had to jump into streams and troll people a little bit as God of Law, and then when my old channel got yeeted due to unfair copyright claims, I just put the MLS in front of it and ran.
That doesn't make sense.
Welcome. Thanks for having me.
No, it's always weird when you're on someone
Welcome to
else's
my
and you're
show.
like, that's fine. We can do a takeover. So, obviously, I think most people will have seen your coverage of the arraignment, which was kind of, should we say, if not ground zero, the first blow. How are you feeling about that stream?
I was iffy about doing it, and in fact, I don't know if anyone knows Valhalla Awaits. He's sort of LawTube adjacent, and him and I have a channel, or we stream together. And I messaged him. I said, I think I'm going to cover the arraignment. And we were talking back and forth, and I think we came to the conclusion that Nick would want us to. Nick
How
would stream it
convenient!
for sure.
Oh.
I figured it out. I made the calls to try to figure out how to get the Zoom link and just got it going. So it was interesting, definitely interesting to see Nick up there. Now I will say this. I mean, I don't know him personally, not like other law tubers or whatever you want to call us that have hung out with him personally. I haven't. We don't have that kind of relationship. But I thought it was important to cover namely because it was him, and also because my channel is geared towards sort of educating uh, people on how the law works in broad strokes, right?
Sure.
But so I thought it was important on both counts that we see it, that it be preserved, because I don't think it was going to be preserved otherwise. I don't know anyone else who is streaming it live from the Zoom feed, and once it's gone, it's gone. So I wanted to make sure that that was preserved so we can start sort of the legal analysis, right, as we do. So for a couple of reasons, and I feel good about it. I'm glad I did it. I don't have any regrets about it. It was definitely interesting though.
Did you know? Okay, so did you know what you had in your hands when you began streaming? I mean, you said that you contacted Valhalla and you were like, well, what would Nick do? But I mean, this isn't a major national case. This isn't Johnny Depp versus Amber Heard. It isn't Rittenhouse. This is ostensibly, I mean, I can't picture LawTube covering the arrest for drug and firearm or open outlaid firearm possession for a random person on the street. This is very particular because it is drama involving your community.
So your question is did I know what I had my hands on?
Yeah.
I think I did. I mean, I had an idea that this was going to be kind of a bigger stream. Now, again, with my old channel, I covered James and Jennifer Crumbly, and that was the biggest case that I had covered. And I don't know if you're familiar with that, but they're two Michigan parents that were charged in connection. Their son pew-pewed a school, and they were criminally charged for essentially being neglectful. And that was.
I think I am familiar. Yeah, I am familiar.
Yeah, and so with this new channel, I really hadn't gotten any traction. So I didn't anticipate it being as large as it was because I just didn't have that many subs when I first set out on the stream. What was that, Friday morning or whatever it was? So so I didn't think it was going to get as big as it did, and then it's got 30,000 views or something, which is sizable for me, for my channel. Even my old channel, that's sizable.
Oh yeah, no, that's dramatic. I mean, it's essentially, I mean, you're right, it's become a resource stream for other people to use, view, and dissect.
That was the one thing I tried. I wanted to stay quiet because I brought some panel members on as well.
I saw.
And that was happenstance. They were in the chat, and I had streamed with them before, so I just shot them some links if they wanted to jump on. I didn't plan on having anybody on the panel with me, but I wanted to remain silent during the actual arraignment when Nick and the judge and everyone were talking, so that it could be used as a resource. And I don't mind people clipping it and using it, so that's fine. I've always been fine with that. But I did want to kind of, my goal was to preserve it. I think I even said that before I streamed, is I want to at least preserve the arraignment, so that other people can look back on it, because it's something sort of shocking. There were a lot of people. There are a lot of, whether you hate Nick or love Nick, you have to realize that he has a huge number of followers, supporters, people that give him a lot of money, and it's a traumatic thing when you have these super fans or just regular fans that have been following you, and all of a sudden you're being charged with something. The rumors that that people have been denying seem to have some credibility to them.
I mean, I know you're a lawyer. I know you're a lawyer, but you're not representing him. Seems to because again, people keep doing this, and from I think Warsky said this when talking to Sean and Aaron. It's like, well, you called people you call Kino Casino crazy. You said, well, Nick's not on drugs. He's not neglectful. He's not. You're out of your mind. And I'm like, well, it seems like those things had legs. And also, I think I said in my coverage, it's like, uncivil law is like, well, I didn't know if something was going on. I phoned him. It's like, you guys are lawyers, practicing or not. It seems incredibly unobservant to be like, is there any validity to these rumors? Because he clearly wasn't well, right?
Right. And that's why I came out with my second stream, which I did yesterday. It was very short. It was 30 minutes. Sure. And I wanted to have a conversation as if somebody had walked into my office with these exact charges and the fact patterns based on what we knew. And I said, you're going to go to NA, you're going to go daily, you're going to go to therapy and counseling. You're going to bend over backwards to work with Child Protective Services. You're going to do these things because you are going to be found guilty of these things. So you're going to jump through these hoops, and you're going to play the game that you're going to have to play now. And that's why I wanted to do that, because everyone else was like, well, I don't know, did they really find drugs? And I'm like, they found he was doing them. Chances are he tested positive for them during his first random drug test. And all of that means that he's going to have to play this game.
So let's talk about the duality of this, because there is a key duality here between, I think, the legal talk and the stuff you've seen Barnes and Viva saying, and maybe other people on the other side. I think Andrew's been a bit more condemning and like, well, there are issues here. Uncivil laws been crying. But there's the other element there away from the legal stuff. And that is that many people are going, you are a community. Nick, even as he's fallen from favor, he has less viewership now. He is still the linchpin of that community. And when you're saying things like, oh, well, this could be the start of the greatest comeback story in history. And when other people are saying, well, I don't know if this is true, whatever. That isn't just defense of Nick. That is in some ways defense of yourselves, isn't it?
Well, I don't know. Nick's faults are not that he streams law content or used to stream law content on YouTube. So I don't know if we need to defend ourselves so much as I was saying those things, such as this could be a great comeback for him. Speaking specifically for or to his fans, right? This could be a huge comeback for him, or the start of a comeback for him, a renaissance. LawTube or lawyers talking on YouTube, whatever you want to call it, has been a thing for a little bit. Nick is I was trying to think of an analogy. He's the Thomas Edison, right? Edison didn't invent the light bulb. He kind of perfected it and made it a profitable endeavor. And then other people improved on it and ran with it. I mean, there's thousands of people that manufacture light bulbs today, right? He's the Thomas Edison. He kind of started the ball rolling with it. So it's not reliant upon him, I don't think. And I know he's got a lot more headlines than us, but I'm part of I would say a smaller group of YouTubers that all talk law and things like that. Completely separate and distinct from Nick. Could we exist without him sort of setting the laying the path down? Maybe not, probably not. But it doesn't mean that if he falls, we all fall. I don't think that's the way to go. You have people like Emily D. Baker, you have Joe from Good Logic with huge numbers, and viewers that are dwarfing Nick.
But I mean, do you think the fact that like he's got friends like Andrew, like Uncivil, who've watched this unfold and not stepped in? I mean, that's less true of, I think much less true of you. You've streamed with Nick, but it doesn't seem like you've got like this close relationship some of the others do. Do you think perhaps the fact that, LawTube seems catered towards a more traditionalist audience, with more of a center-right to right-wing bent, that the fact that nobody stepped in and called this out earlier or disassociated earlier could do damage to them as well?
I think there's definitely going to be some people that take a hit for not stepping up. I know there's already some blowback, and I've seen it in the chats where, I won't name people, but, if you were really such a good friend, you would have tried to do something. I've been DM'd and messaged from a lot of different people in the last week or so about all this, or since Friday anyways. And I am aware that people attempted to intervene, not the people anyone's talking about. They attempted interventions and things like that. So I know there are people out there that did. But then again, Nick's in Minnesota, Uncivil is in Texas, I'm in Michigan, Good Logic's in New York or New Jersey. It's not like we're right next door. It's hard to, I'm gonna try to do an intervention with you right now. It's like, okay, well, I'll just turn the camera off and walk away. Yeah. So it's a little bit more difficult. So I give everybody credit for doing whatever they did. And also at the end of the day, it's up to the addict. I'm a criminal defense attorney,
Sure.
and I'm also a family law attorney. When people are addicts, there's nothing you could say or do to convince them to stop unless they're forced to. And even then, they'll relapse unless they really want to make a change. So at the end of the day, it's all on them. It is 100% on them. So
let's get to sort of a bit more of the nitty gritty. We might come back to more of the community through this, but so as this has developed, my understanding is, again, I keep saying I'm not a lawyer. I'm obviously fucking not. My understanding is that through whatever mechanism, a mandatory report was filed through his pastor. Now, it seems to be that that's also through observation of the children and observation of his streams for a significant period of time. And let's deal with that one to begin with. A lot of people have said that the pastor shouldn't have mandatorily reported them. Now, my understanding was that's not really an optional thing. The pastor has to mandatorily report. Right. He could face prison time for not doing that. So when we're seeing things like this, what's your...
Yeah, see, so this is a fundamental, legal theory issue, right? So what Barnes is talking about is a legal theory that he believes the law should be different, right? And we can all debate on what the law should be. Now, the law requires the pastor to report this. It is what it is. If you don't like the law, then you need to change the law.
Sure.
Beyond that, the reasons why Barnes believes that the law should be changed don't really apply here. Because what he was saying is that if you go and talk to a pastor about something, and then he's legally obligated to report it, that's a bad law. But that's not what happened here. It sounds like there were other people in the church community that brought it to the pastor's attention. And then it's not like Nick went to the pastor and then the pastor reported him. It doesn't sound like that. It sounds like the pastor made observations based on what other people were saying they observed. And it's not just like one person either. It is at least 4 people, as I last understand it, with the most recent documents that were released, that observed a variety of different things. And those were all reported to the pastor and the police. So I do not agree with mandatory reporting for pastors because it disincentivizes people to go get help. I don't agree with it for therapists either. The general rule for attorneys is that we have attorney-client privilege. I cannot disclose any of your past crimes that you confess to me. However, if you are telling me that you're going to commit a future crime, then I can disclose it to prevent that crime from happening.
But we're talking about, but this is what we get wrapped up in with the sort of lawyer speak, as opposed to the reality of the current situation. Now, people want to, because again, people want to defend Nick. Ultimately, with the information that we have in front of us, if that's the information that the priest had in front of him, where he's like, children are being neglected, there's open ammunition, or there are drugs around the house, is that not something that we'd sort of want one of our community figures to actually go and report and try and make sure that those, remove the personal thing of Nick? Because I think that what I've observed of LawTube over the years is we should protect children. And the children in this case are potentially the ones who are very much at risk. And the more information that comes out, it seems that is more and more valid.
Yes, I agree that we would want people in that position to be able to report it. I think what your original question was is, should they be mandated to?
Well, my original question is, so again, my question is the fact that there's a lot of condemnation towards that pastor that I've seen, and condemnation towards people condemning Nick or getting involved, but it seems like and then Civil Law said this on stream. He was like, well, I am angry at the pastor because my loyalties are to Nick. And I'm like, okay, I understand that your friend is in this situation, but it it seems odd to kind of talk about the importance of family tradition and everything else while sort of glossing over the fact that your friend seems to have had the one that's had that breakdown where their kids are at some kind of risk. So is that condemnation and anger misplaced?
Yes. And yes, it is misplaced. And while you were just talking, I had sort of a thought, and I don't know that this to be entirely true because I don't know exactly who said what.
Sure.
But if you listen to, say, Kurt or Barnes or people that do appellate work, they're not in the trenches. They're not doing actual trial work. They're not dealing with the people and the humans involved. I think those people have a different perspective than the attorneys that are talking that actually do the trial work, that are actually involved with people. Because my first thought was, think of the kids. You need to think of the kids. You need to get the kids back in the home. What do you need to do that and prevent any sort of parental termination? And where the other ones like Barnes and Kurt were like, oh, well, they done him dirty. We got to look at constitutional law arguments. But they're talking from an appellate standpoint. By that point, the guy's been convicted and sentenced, and it is what it is. And you're just making legal arguments. You're not dealing with the human element of it. And so I think that might be the fundamental disconnect between the various YouTubers out there that are talking, is the ones that are generally practicing legal arguments and legal theories in the appellate level, as opposed to the ones that are down in the trenches actually working with people. I think that's the different perspective. So it's wrong to condemn the pastor. It's wrong to focus on, in my opinion, it's wrong to focus on the constitutional arguments. What you really need to do is focus on the children and making sure that that family is safe and reunited and clean and sober, because that's the best thing that an attorney representing Nick could do right now, and that's the only way that I see it. And so when you're talking about these lofty goals, Nick is not the hill to die on for constitutional Second Amendment or Fourth Amendment rights. This is not the case.
I mean,
so forget about that, and let's focus on the issue.
I mean, focusing in on the issue, people are talking about when Nick's going to see his kids again, and what that cleanness looks like. Now, we've had quite a lot of leaks from the group chat. I think today we had a load of leaks. I can bring those up if it's helpful if you haven't seen them yet.
I don't know which ones you're specifically talking about. I've seen a few today.
Let's just bring those up. Let's start with that, and then I'll bring them up on screen. Is this one? Yes. Sorry. Let me just resize this. So these are the group chat leaks that came out today, which I think are pretty dramatic. Cool. I'm literally talking about a bullshit neglect report from a specifically vindictive person that is quite literally the opposite of truth. I'm not talking about anything else at all. I'm not saying anything else in here. Talk to me in DMs. And no guns were ever discharged in this home. I don't even own a .22. I haven't fired any of my guns since moving from my other home to here. It's been about 5 years, and all of them were locked handguns in a safe. AR had a lock through the receiver. My dad was helping with the driving the other day for our kids' education and extracurricular activities. I mean, yeah, it seems like so two things occur to me through this. Firstly, Nick is talking an awful lot in stuff that, to my understanding, now again, not a lawyer, but I do understand disclosure. These seem like messages that can be used against him, and probably he shouldn't be saying publicly and openly to people. Seems to be fighting rather viciously with people in this group chat, and while he can say, well, it's got a lock on the receiver and everything else, I don't know whether that applies to the law, but it's sort of, again, talking around the issue that Nick had his home in the state that it was in.
Yeah, and see, the thing is that if any of these little things end up being challenged, they're going to go against him, right? The state's going to use everything that you say against you, including this. And that's why you don't say that. I saw a report that, I think he even goes on with further issues. but or makes further statements. It's all bad because essentially, okay, so first of all, you're admitting that there's firearms in the house, right? I mean, that's one element that they have to prove. So you just did, 1/4 of the job for the state, right? You're giving the state information and evidence that they can use against you. Whether or not there's a spent shell casing, well, you just admitted that you've never fired a 22. Okay, well, the spent shell casing got there somehow. So are you lying then, or are you lying now? Or why is it that there's random ammunition, spent ammunition in your house if you've never fired? How neglectful are your children? or I mean, that sort of thing. I mean, obviously it got there somehow. But he doesn't have to make these statements. He doesn't have to say anything like that, and then they can't use it against him. But here's the thing. Even us attorneys, if we get into a sticky situation, we can sometimes panic and act on emotion and not respond appropriately. So I don't want to say I don't fault him. I understand the desire to defend yourself, but you gotta stop. You gotta step back.
But again, he's defending himself to his fan base, essentially, to other lawyers. I mean, this is you're doing cocaine at 8 a.m. with your kids watching cartoons in the living room. What the fuck are you talking about? 8 a.m., homie, I'm usually driving home at 8 a.m. and about to go to sleep. I mean, it's just it's bizarre.
So
because
I have so many questions with that 8 a.m. statement, because part of the allegations is that he drives intoxicated. Well, if you've watched any of his streams, he's drinking until 3, 4, 5 a.m. in the morning, and then he's supposedly driving at 8. Probably not good, right? Yeah. So, I mean, I can make that argument, and I'm just looking at the messages and watching his streams. I don't need any other information. I can convince a jury that you were driving drunk.
Yeah. And this is I think very much part of the issue when looking at this. I can see Nick has become a different person to the one that I saw in 2017. He is a vastly different person. The only thing that is still consistent is the type of scotch he drinks. That's it. He is.
See, I never watched him in 2017. So in just sort of context, I first discovered him through Viva Fry when Viva Fry did a stream about one of my cases that I was handling. And then I was like, oh, there's lawyers talking on YouTube about things. I had done a few things back in 2018, but nothing live, nothing commenting on current cases. It was just sort of short little clippets. But so I discovered him in 2020, and except for certain, we'll say, pleasure devices, or maybe not so pleasure devices, I haven't seen much of a difference in him fundamentally, right? Because he always talks about wild, bombastic things. He's always trying to insult people. He's always getting drunk. That's what I've seen since 2020. So how was he in 2017, 2018?
I think Nick was a nerd. Nick's still a nerd, but he was a nerd. I mean, I remember him talking to Medica about Warhammer. He was embedded with certain communities, and he knew those communities, but he was just a guy making content, and then Rittenhouse blew him up to astronomical levels, as did the Depp and Heard trial. And I think one of the things, I don't know if you saw my last stream, where I was just basically piecing together bits of this, but the real change seems to have come in the last 2 years, where Nick has gone from sort of this family man to here are the important things, here is the law, here are the breakdowns, we'll make it interesting, we'll talk to people. I mean, in some ways he's taking the networking of the blood sports communities and getting panels together to discuss something and bring it into this sort of more controlled framework. But then the locals thing happened with his wife. I showed one stream where he is debating somebody who's a VTuber Turkey on whether he's a cuck. And there's, little things like the Wine Mum stream where he's dressed in an anime shirt and orange
Yeah.
shorts, and he reviews the sex toy on stream, and then there is one poignant one where he's just talking about how much he doesn't want to do fucking law content, that he talks about it, refers to it like his job at the bank. He's like, I want things that are going to excite me and focus, and I've seen content creators do this before, and it's cope, and it's because they are I think I said Nick is somebody who strikes me as having this midlife crisis and finally having the freedom to do it and just entirely cut loose because he was finally unshackled. This is, in some ways, when you get someone who drinks, we say that being drunk is an excuse because it lowers our inhibitions. It makes us more honest.
Yeah.
And in the same way, Nick became drunk on that sort of freedom, either financial or power. And this is Nick at lowered inhibitions.
I get that a little. I mean, I have had nowhere near, not even a drop of sort of the fame that Nick has had. But I do have a fairly loyal following, and I see a lot of them in the chat here. And you get sort of that, we'll say, God of Law complex. And to some extent. And I noticed it in myself a little bit, and that's kind of why I pulled back from streaming. But what is it, Bill Murray, that said, like, when you get a little bit of fame, you can either turn into a complete asshole or you're going to recover from turning into a complete asshole. But either way, you're going to turn into a complete asshole at some point. And it's one of those, like, to just Nick go off the deep end. I feel like it was tempting for him. And yeah, like, you're right. He was kind of going through a midlife crisis. I mean, I don't know what else to say.
I think it's one of those because it's propped up by, there's this element in, there is an element in kind of leftists will do this, and I'm going to draw a comparison because I know that otherwise it just looks like I'm attacking a certain community, because I'm not. I think this is just an online thing. Where leftists will do this thing where they go, we really care about racism and transphobia and people who are mean to minorities, and then they'll get into a beef with somebody and be like, you're an N-word, you're an Uncle Tom, you just want to be oppressed by the state, regardless of what they are, because they don't actually care. They just like the fact that they have the power. And they'll excuse transphobia and that they do, or their own communities do, really brazenly. And Hassan is doing this now. Hassan is outright lying about things that were recorded, watched by, in one case, I think 1 million people, and he's just lying about what this interview was with this Houthi pirate. And he's like, that's fine, I can just do that. In the same way, I look at what Nick's doing, and people are going, well, he still cares about the traditional values. Nick's still our guy, when it's quite obvious that he's not. I've had a lot of people who dislike my coverage, more so than I think any other coverage I've done, because they're like, well, how can you laugh at Nick? Well, like it or not, Nick was creating entertainment out of, things like the Johnny Depp trial and Rittenhouse, and, people suffered during those things. It's, when it happens to Nick, it's a problem. But if it was happening to some random person who no one knew, I don't think the community would have the problem. I think it's an interesting double standard, particularly when the community seems to have high moral grounding.
Well, and I think, no, I agree with your analogy entirely. And I had like a couple of thoughts, and now I lost my train of thought. That's Nick would definitely stream this, I think, and Nick would have fun with this, and Nick would make jokes about this if it was somebody else.
Yeah.
Man, where was I going? I had a thought about what you're saying about the power to do something, and I can't remember it now. Sorry.
No, you're fine. You're fine. I think I think it was interesting watching Steve come on. And one of the things that
I'm sorry. I remember now. I think a lot of people, like I said earlier, like I even have, some of my fans are in your chat now. And when my channel was taken down, the fans were way more upset than I was about it. Yeah. And I think because they felt personally invested in making law simple, in the MLS network. And the fact that someone could strike it and take it down so easily, they felt personally attacked. And even when I stood up and said, guys, I don't care. Not as much as you guys do, obviously. I feel like in some way I was minimizing their level of commitment to me. And some of them got mad at me for not caring as much. And so I think when people have invested in a personality, just like anything else, and that personality fails them, it lets them down because of, they're doing drugs and they've got living concubines and all these things. I feel like it's almost more of a personal attack on them. Kurt took it very hard.
Yeah.
And other people took it very hard, and they want to just kind of live in denial about this because they've invested so much into it. And if the person that I've invested so much into could be that bad, what does it say about me? And things like that. And so that's why I think there's a lot of people out there that are just denying it or hating on the streams that are covering it. I get people commenting in my streams like, I'm making stuff up and I don't know what I'm talking about. And it's like, well, okay, show me where I'm making stuff up. But when I'm covering the Nick stuff. So I think that's part of it. I think that's human nature. When a family member gets attacked, you defend them as if it was yourself. And so I think that's what we're seeing a lot of, particularly with Nick. And that's why people like Barnes are so favored, because they're offering Nick a way out, and then when other people say Barnes doesn't know what the hell he's talking about, all of a sudden we're the bad guys, and it's causing a rift.
Yeah, I mean, it's Lordship Civil War right now, which is interesting. I found it
2.0.
2.0. What was the first one?
The first one was when DUI guy was in the Johnny Depp trial and made the face, and then there was a falling out between Legal Bites and Rekieta, and it sort of fractured that way.
I was really.
That's what I say, anyways.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think it's very interesting that you say that, because when I was watching Steve, one of my comments was, I think Steve is enjoying this more than he wants to admit to. Because, and that's probably very unfair, I don't know him, but I thought it was interesting that he came on and was talking, and he was like, well, the last time I spoke to Nick, we had an argument about theology, and I did a 1.5 hour stream about why I was right afterwards. And it seemed very interesting at the time to go, well, I'm not saying that God's punishing him, but and
it could be. Steve is awesome, by the way. If you don't know Steve, maybe check him out a little bit. Steve Gosney. But he wears his heart on his sleeve, and he is generally who he is on stream. He's just kind of that nice guy that's always nice. Whatever he may think or say, he's just sort of that nice guy. Yeah,
look, don't get me wrong. My first impression of him is not great, and that's fine. Like I've done this before where I've changed my view on people, and you see them.
The only time you saw him was on my arraignment stream of Nick Rekieta. It's probably not.
Yeah, it's probably not the best.
He got a little emotional and a little religious, and I mean it is. But Steve's awesome. So I would highly recommend you check out some of his other stuff that he's done.
I will say this. I have seen more men cry during this than I have while covering like art communities who currently who are constantly being groomed and saying other people are hate criming them, and I have seen more men cry during this. I mean, Aaron cried last night on Alex Stein. It's pretty dramatic, the emotional investment people seem to have in the community. It surprised me.
Speaking of Aaron, Aaron needs to shut the hell up.
Yes, he does.
Of Nick.
Not
because of Nick. Because of yourself, sir, Aaron. You need to shut up to preserve yourself. Oh my God, he's saying way too much. That's all I'm gonna say about that.
Well, Nick, Aaron is a clout goblin. So I'm not a lawyer. I'm going to be a bit more blunt. I've watched people do this 100 fucking times. Oh, he was talking to Ethan Ralph, and Ethan Ralph came on and said, well, you're the grounds, you're the person who was there. And he's like, oh yeah, that's great. That's what I want to be known for. Well, if you don't want to be known for that, maybe not going on every single fucking stream to discuss it would be a good idea, because that is what he has done. He has basically toured, and from what I've seen, I think it was Red Bar who showed him his morning show where he brought April out in sort of a bikini or pants and a bra or whatever it was, and it seems like he's somebody who's been in the entertainment industry a long time. They attach themselves to the Rekietas, and it does. I mean, this is my opinion. It seems like he put his wife in a position where she could be used to progress his career, and now he is furthering that by crying about it on multiple streams to further his career. That is my impression of Aaron.
Well, he's also litigating his divorce or his upcoming divorce on YouTube. That's what I see. I see a lot of what he's saying is like, I get that every day from my family law clients coming in and be like, she's doing this and she's doing this and she's doing this. And I don't know. It's just, he's trying to litigate his divorce through YouTube is what he's doing. And it's just bad because people will say things that that they think is going to put the other person in a bad light, and they realize they have no clue that it's going to come back to haunt them. Don't admit to doing drugs, maybe on YouTube.
Yeah,
maybe start with that, and let's just go from there.
So I know that you don't. I believe you when you say you don't watch a lot of Nick's streams, because I know from personal experience when you're a streamer yourself, and you've got other things on. I also have a day job, I have a career, all these other things. It can be really hard to keep up with people who are even in your own circle. There is just so much to get through. What is your actual general impression of this sort of swinger accusation thrown at Nick that he's basically moved in another couple to live in his house and kind of replace the nanny and all that kind of thing?
Well, you see, so when he was first talking about these sort of things and doing it, it was always sort of in a jokey sort of sense, don't necessarily do or abide by. And I'm even worse in people's chats. So if you ever see me in somebody's chat, I'm just a degenerate in the chats. But it's a character for me, because there's no way I'm doing any of this stuff. But and so I kind of took it at that at first, but then it became more and more and more. And then there was a meetup in, I think, Nashville, and everything went silent. And if you weren't on locals, you didn't really know what was going on, and nobody talks about it. And I was like, okay, so something went down. And so you're like, all right, so maybe there's a little bit more to what's actually happening. But so that's my take on Nick's whole thing. At first, I thought it was just a character he's putting on, and then it became probably a little bit more real. Like, okay, so this is something that's actually going on. And I'm not in his locals, but I do follow his stuff. I mean, obviously his local stuff makes it out there onto the greater internet. And so you can see the stuff that's going on. It's not at all a lifestyle that I like or am at all interested in. It's kind of cringy and gross to me, but to each their own. My whole point is that none of this would be a big deal if he didn't have 5 kids in the house.
Yeah, it's true. And again, I think I say this pretty publicly. I don't care what someone does in the privacy of their own home as long as it's not illegal. And when I say illegal, I mean, causing significant harm. I don't care if someone's smoking weed or something. I don't give a fuck. Yeah. But when it's around kids, it does have an impact. One thing I will say quickly is, because I know we've got people in the chat, I can see little comments and stuff. It's quite hard to react to. If someone does have questions or stuff, if you super chat them in, then we can go through them at the end. We can do all that. That would be good. One thing that I did see in the chat, but it reminded me. Are you familiar with Jack Murphy?
No. Maybe if you gave me context.
So Jack Murphy was on Tim Pool a lot. He ran something called the Liminal Order, which was a red pill organization promoting traditional values and conservative values. And his career imploded when he was interviewed by Sydney. And super chat questions came in regarding his history of cuckoldry, where it was turned that he was basically pimping out his girlfriend.
Oh, that guy.
And
Yeah.
Nick condemned that a lot, as did many other people. Also, many of us laughed at it because it was fucking hilarious. So, you know, and I think this is where, and this is where the thing comes from, where it's like, you know, well, I'm very live and let live. I also think you should probably hold the standards that you're expecting other people to hold. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's one of those where if you're going to condemn Jack Murphy and then do Jack Murphy-esque things, that's a little bit fucking weird.
Yeah, no, it is. And is it a little bit of not necessarily projecting? When I think of projecting, I think of I'm going to do this bad thing, and then therefore I'm going to accuse this other person of doing it, even though they might not be. Is it not projecting, but I can't think of the word, but something similar to that, where you're just trying to hide your own deviance by making fun of it, and sort of like, I don't know. Is that what's going on? It's weird. But yeah, I remember that. Yeah, he went all over on that, and that was the whole thing with the ball, though. It started off as a joke and sort of like, oh my god, who would ever use this thing? Now I'm convinced he used it.
Yeah, and, I think so am I. You know, do you? So, from the legal documents that have come out, without your okay, well, let's say with your lawyer hat on, how bad is this?
It's hard to take it off.
Yeah.
How bad is it? Like, what's the end result going to be, or like how bad is it for him in the fight, or what do you think?
So I'm in the environmental sector. Pretty open about this, and we tend to work in what we call best estimates and reasonable worst case, as our two things. So reasonable worst case. What's the worst thing? What can you picture as the worst thing that we're going to prepare for that is reasonably going to happen that we can make preparations for? Best estimates, what we think. So what's your reasonable worst case for Nick Rekieta and his wife?
Well, so remember, there's two cases here, and no one's talking about the second case, with the child protective case. But setting that aside for a second, we'll talk about the criminal charges. Now, obviously, it's 25 years. Without having gone through Minnesota's sentencing guidelines, if he's found guilty on those charges, I would expect him as a first offender to at least do a couple of years. But in reality, I think the weight of the narcotics that they collected, being so close to the threshold, I think a good lawyer working with the prosecutor and a plea agreement, assuming he gets clean as much as he can before his next court date, which would be in August. So he's got a few months to get clean. Could work out a deal where he pleads to a misdemeanor and does no time, would be on probation for a couple of years, going through some sort of treatment program, which usually runs about a year to 2 years, depending on how the programs are set up. And that's, but he's got to stay clean and sober, right? And if he doesn't, if he violates those bond conditions or the probation conditions, after a couple of times, the courts will expect somebody to relapse at least once. Everyone knows that 85% of substance abusers will relapse. So he might, if he does that a couple of times, he might spend a weekend or two in jail. But if I had like my crystal ball sort of thing, I'm going to say he's going to get probation. He's going to get clean. He's going to go through a lot of counseling, therapy, and Narcotics Anonymous and things like that. And the guns are going to be gone. He's not going to get those back. Those are going to be forfeited in exchange for this plea agreement. And he's going to eventually get his kids back, depending on the nature. Now, the neglect cases or the neglect allegations are basically parents had drugs, were using drugs, and forgot about the kids, didn't feed them, didn't clothe them. That's easy enough to recover from if he stays clean. So if he's staying clean, he's going to get the kids back in short order. That's going to be sort of the expected result. That's what I'm going to go with. He's going to be on probation. He's going to have to do treatment. He's going to get the kids back in 6 to 9 months if he does everything right. However, he faces a very real possibility of doing some jail time because they are fairly second degree possession, borderlining. Well, it's not enough for distribution. They're not alleging distribution, like the sale of it. So I don't think he's going to get a terrible amount of time, but he could get a year very easily. But I don't expect that. I don't expect that if he takes the right course and he gets the right attorney and they make the right deal.
Do you think the fact that he called his current judge, who's overseeing the case, a bitch might hurt him?
So I don't know this judge, and I don't know Minnesota courts. I know this is a small county. Small county judges are sort of kings and queens in their territory. That might come back to hurt him. However, I don't think this judge should be presiding over it because of that. And so I think there should be a motion to recuse this judge and get a new judge. I don't know the procedure in Minnesota. That being said, I would expect this judge to be able to set that aside and decide this thing, the sentence, without taking that into consideration. The other thing too is when you're dealing with the plea agreements, oftentimes you're working out a sentence structure with the prosecutor, and the judge is just rubber stamping it. So the judge isn't deciding what the sentencing is. You've already sort of worked that out between the defense attorney and the prosecutor, and the judge says, "Okay, if the state's good with it, I'm good with it," kind of thing. So the judge should have minimal impact unless it goes to trial and he's found guilty. The judge should have minimal impact on the sentencing. I mean, they could throw wrenches in there and say, "No, I'm not going to accept that. He's got to do more time." But I don't know. I would give the judge more credit than that. And I have listened to her in the oral arguments on Nick's civil case, and I find her to be a fairly reasonable judge during those oral hearings. So I don't know. I'm gonna assume the best in that situation, but I would definitely try to get a new judge if I was him.
Do you think that so what's the feeling within LawTube generally? I know we're saying there's sort of a civil war now. How bad is that, generally speaking?
I mean, I'm not in the mix. I'm not in the mix. I'm not. People aren't coming to me and saying things. I haven't been banned or blocked by anybody on Twitter. Yet anyways. So I'm sort of on the periphery. Like nobody's attacking me and I'm not really attacking anybody. I have thrown out a few snipes there, here and there. So I really don't know. The ones that I interact with, were, Joe and Kurt and all that stuff. Obviously they're taking it emotionally, but they're doing okay. And nobody's really attacking me, and I'm not attacking anybody. So outside of that, I can't really speak to it.
That's fair. I mean, I think it's obviously something everyone's going to comment on.
Yeah. I mean, there are people that are wanting to remain silent that are not talking about it because they're concerned about maybe getting some blowback, and that's fair. I do understand people that don't want to talk about it.
I mean,
because they don't want to pick sides.
I mean, during the arraignment, you guys were using information from Kiwi Farms. Obviously, the community's got. I don't want to say strong links, but it's obviously a resource that is used. Depending on the person, they may have strong links or be a Kiwi farmer.
Right.
Now, there's a stream where Nick's talking to Sean, I think it is, where this is brought up. And obviously that relationship between Rekieta and Null has degraded over time significantly. Do you think that, like, because Nick's response to Sean was fairly, well, you laughed about me, and Nick is, seems to be quite sensitive to that. Do you think that depending on how this plays out, do you think there's a concern there that actually, Nick's going to come out of this and be like, well, you're not my friends. Fuck you for covering this.
It's possible. I have seen messages from Nick where he says he doesn't care who grifts on this, but I don't know if he's just saying that and is thinking otherwise. That was one of my thoughts when when I was going to stream the arraignment was, is Nick going to be pissed? But frankly, I don't care. Because I don't think LawTube is dependent on Nick the way it used to be. You know, everyone got their, or not everyone, but a lot of people got their start on his channel. And like I said, I've been on his channel a few times, and you know, you definitely get a bump in the subscribers and you attract different people. But I think Nick would be on it. And if Nick is true to his word, which we don't know if he would be, because he's, you know, has said things and then done other things. But I don't know. I do know that people are concerned about it. I do know that people are concerned about saying something that could ruin their friendship with Nick, and therefore they're not going to say anything.
Do you think it's? I mean, you've got people like Andrew who seem to have a much closer relationship with Nick. They've been making content very recently together, and you know, when Andrew came on yours, he didn't plug himself, but you plugged him. Steve held up his book. Do you think that's optically odd, or just sort of accepting what the situation you guys are in?
I think it was so new, actually, at the time of my arraignment. A lot of this hadn't set in. We didn't really know a lot of the fundamental allegations. Like, things are still getting revealed today. And so no one really had a chance to like pick a side or analyze this at all. So I think it was a little different when I did my arraignment. And it's weird to say because it was only like 4 days ago, but when I streamed the arraignment, it was brand new. It was like, oh, he got arrested, and the next day we were going to have an arraignment. Let's see what's going on. Let's see what sort of statements that might be made about this case. And then the documents started pouring out, and no one really had an opportunity to digest anything. We were all just sort of living it in the moment. So I don't know if there was really an opportunity to really look into this. I think the thing that the catalyst that might have started sort of the issues between various streamers was the Barnes and Viva stream.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I have to come down to attorneys that are working in the trenches with the people in the courts and appellate attorneys, and just a different approach to it. And when Barnes is coming out there and saying, you got to challenge this on constitutional rights and things like that, you know, people were sending me links to the video, and I said, but he's talking about the way he wants the law to be, not the way it is, not the way it's going to be applied by this judge. And so I think that's really what kind of started the rift. People are stepping back and saying, well, yes, he's our friend. We would love to get him off on a constitutional argument and get everything kicked. But in reality, it's just not going to happen, man. He's going to go down for this. He's going to plead to something. He's going to have to.
I mean, I remember when Viva Fry started making content. I remember watching Viva Fry. I actually watched an awful lot of him back at the time. And then lockdowns happened and Viva became a bit more extreme in his outlook. I mean, he looks...
I do remember that change in Viva.
Yeah, he is a dramatically different person now. Yeah. And what's a good way to put this? There is a branch of LawTube which is very, don't trust the government, don't trust anyone. And there's like, well, you know, Nick's being screwed over. They could have planted things. Does it concern you at all that, like, you pass yourself as educational? I want to teach people about law, but there is a contingent of the community you're part of that will look at something like this and go, well, it's a fucking conspiracy. Is that not a bit worrying?
Well, so I have my foot in both camps. You don't trust the government, never trust a cop, and the government is only out there to screw you, is my position. That being said, once you're in the system, you need to understand how to play the system.
Sure.
So we could talk all we want about how the laws should be in our view, but the reality is that the warrant's going to be upheld, even if it's not upheld. The allegations made, or the affidavit made in support of the warrant, are going to be enough to sustain at least a couple of those charges, and then he's going to be guilty anyway, you know, of those things. He's going to have issues to deal with, even setting aside the warrant. and the drugs that they collected, right? So you have enough, looking through the affidavit, you have enough to bring charges on him in the first place. So why are we even dealing with it? Make your argument, preserve it for appellate purposes, because you need to do that. But then let's move on to the actual matter, which is getting past this.
Because I think there's because I think there's a difference between saying, you know, don't trust the government and don't trust the systems. Like, again, I wouldn't talk to a cop without a lawyer. Because their job is to get me on something, essentially. And exactly. I don't know the law well enough to know whether I might accidentally be guilty of some shit. And in the same way, you know, governments are there to preserve themselves and status quo. I fully accept that. I think the difference is when it comes into, well, we don't trust the government, therefore, because the weight of evidence is, even if the warrant had issues, even if the police had issues, even if there are biases there, it does not change the fact that we can see what Nick was like. We can see what sort of like the way that has changed in him, and we can see that, you know, he's got 5 kids in the house in an environment that's a bit fucked. So it doesn't really change. Like I'm the way I view the law is simply this: like, law enforcement should be there to protect people and serve victims. So I'm less concerned with, I'm much more concerned with something bad happened, we should do something about that and confront it, than, hey, have you violated my whichever amendment right it is for gun ownership? Is that First Amendment? Or is that...
That's Second Amendment.
Second Amendment. There we go.
Yeah. Well, and that's the other thing, too, with regard to, like, the search and seizure without a warrant. You know, Nick is challenging the warrant on at the doorstep and refusing to give them access to the house. Your place is not to challenge it there. If you want to challenge the warrant, you challenge the warrant in court. You're not going to do anything. You're not going to be effective on your front lawn forcing the cops to break down the door. You know, you're just not going to. They're going to go in. So you might as well minimize the damage to your home and just let them in. Challenge the warrant in court. It's those sort of things. It's you know, I'm going to stand on principle. Great. Attorneys love clients with principles and money because you're our best friend. So, you know, you could stand on principle all you want, but the reality is that they're going to go in the house. They're going to find whatever they find. You could challenge the warrant later. Chances are you're not going to be very successful in challenging the warrant. So you better start making plans for how you're going to resolve this case with a favorable plea, you know. So go to NA. He should be in NA every single day and getting clean at this point.
Do you think that the people who are do you think that the people who are worried about what this might do to their communities, the people who are more closely linked to Nick still, I'm not talking about like Joe here, but maybe people like Uncivil or like people who are really embedded, do you think they're doing a disservice to their audiences by sort of sweeping for this? Or do you think that that's just the natural path, that they believe this?
Well, what do you mean as far as making the constitutional arguments and sort of supporting?
Because I mean, like Barnes and Viva, like they may truly believe these things. I'm not saying that they don't. I'm not accusing them of lying, but they do have an additional bias towards Nick. You know, it's sort of like, you know, they're not just defending him out of the goodness of their heart. They're doing it because, you know, this is the community they belong to.
Yeah, I think they are doing a disservice, and that was just something specific that I said with regard to Barnes. I said you're misleading the people that are following you. If you want to talk about a grand conspiracy with the deep state and the CIA was, you know, responsible for JFK and all this stuff, fine, whatever. But when you're talking about a specific person who's facing specific criminal charges, yes, you need to be cognitive of the constitutional rights. For example, I had a young lady who was trespassing on property, and she was detained by police. And then the police went into her purse and found, we'll say, narcotics. I don't know what we can say here on YouTube on your channel.
Oh, you're fine. It's very easy. I don't.
Yeah, but she wasn't given authorization. And she had no probable cause to search. So I got it kicked. I got the whole possession stuff kicked. That's what you're supposed to do as an attorney when it's appropriate. But when it's not, when, say, it's out there open and obvious, okay, so now you're guilty of it, right? So now we're just going to minimize the impact. So you're going to start going to NA, you're going to start, doing these things, be prepared to pay fines and fees and be on probation for a year and drug test. That's how you properly advise your client. And that's why I wanted to do my second stream as if I was advising my client. When it's appropriate to challenge it, you challenge it. And when it's not, why waste your time and your client's resources? And why mislead your viewers on YouTube saying these are the things that we should be focusing on when they're not in reality? If you're going to talk practical law, that is not what you need to be doing.
Do you think the fact that April was released before the arraignment even took place, and apparently has no charges against her, is, a bad sign for Nick, and also a sign that Nick probably didn't need to represent her? She seems to have done well enough on her own without him.
No, I think it has nothing to do with Nick. It could. It could have a negative impact on Nick, but it could very well not be. So when the police arrest people on suspicion of whatever, they take their reports and everything to the prosecutor's office, and then the prosecutors are the ones that decide if they're going to issue charges. So there's oftentimes when people are arrested and then everything's handed over to the prosecutor, and the prosecutor decides, you know what, this isn't enough. Sorry, officer, this isn't enough. I'm not going to charge him, release him. And it could be completely independent from anything going on with Nick or his wife. It could be, well, every statement here is that she's just a guest, even though we have allegations that she lived there. I don't think it's enough to say constructive possession of these narcotics, so we're just going to release her. It could be simple as that. Or it could be that she made statements to the police and would be willing to testify against Nick, and in exchange for that, they released her. So I think the fact that she was released before the arraignment, it could be good, or it could simply be, more likely than not, they just didn't have enough to hold her.
Okay.
And bring charges.
What about Nick's wife? Is there a different story there, or does it simply line up with the same position Nick's in?
It lines up with the same position that Nick is in. They are, though, different people. So they're naturally going to be adverse to each other. It was inappropriate for him to say he wanted to represent her. I get why the judge allowed 15 minutes for him to talk to her.
If he's not practicing, does that mean, when we say inappropriate, are we saying inappropriate as in, oh, that's a bit odd, or as a non-practicing lawyer, he shouldn't have done that at all?
It has nothing to do with him practicing. It has, because from my understanding, he still holds a bar card and he's still able to practice. He just doesn't.
Okay.
So it's unethical under the rules that govern us attorneys for him to represent her. Because as an attorney, you must always put your client's best interest before your own. There's tons of rules on that, such as you can't own ownership interest that's subject to the litigation that you're representing a client on. Because then you could potentially put your own interest above that of the client's. And when you are co-defendants, you are by default adverse to your other defendant, because you can easily throw one under the bus to save yourself. And so you can't then represent the other person in that situation. It's just impossible to do that from an ethical standpoint. It's not even ethics. It's a lawyer rule standpoint.
I mean, do you think there'll be some resentment there? Because we heard from Aaron that when she was cleaning Nick's studio, she was calling him an alcoholic and things. This clearly. From
my understanding, there's been some knockdown fights. When I don't like physical fights, but some loud verbal fights between them. And if they are facing, which I suspect they are, also a parental services case, meaning the court's going to step in and remove the kids until they get the help that they need, get the services that they need, and then they'll send the kids back with them. I'm assuming that case is also going on, although that's going to be very hush hush by the court. They don't like to reveal those things. That could also put them at odds with each other, especially if one gets clean and the other one doesn't.
Nick still drink? Because I mean, like the like conditions of release were or, right? They weren't and. So they were you could either take conditions or you could pay the money, and if you paid the money, then he could still drink and relax.
I mean, he can if he paid the money. He shouldn't, though. Either what he should have done is saved the money and used it for a lawyer, and then gone to NA and stopped the drinking and abide by the rest of the terms. He might be reluctant to, because part of it is not having a firearm. So he might be reluctant to do that if he feels like his safety is at issue. And I don't know what he's got going on there. I know he's been swatted a few times and whatever. But other than that, he should just save the money, use it for an attorney, and stop the drugs and alcohol. But if he did pay the bond, he would technically still be allowed to drink and possess firearms and do all that. I still think it would be bad if he continued to use illegal drugs and commit crimes. Definitely.
Yeah, I mean, that would be
shouldn't do that, Nick.
Incredibly fucking stupid. From your perspective,
he paid the money today, Scott Wade says. I don't know where you got that from, Scott, but if he paid the money today, I don't know how he was out, on Friday, unless he signed the terms and conditions and then
paid the money, and then it's like, now I can have a drink. Yeah.
So in Michigan, it's completely different. In Michigan, they'll say you pay $50,000, 10%, and you have to abide by the terms and conditions. It's not an or. It's and you're going to do this. So that was a little unusual to me. You could tell on my arraignment stream, I was a little confused. So was Bronca. There were a few of us that were confused by that.
So with coverage of this, I imagine the coverage of this is going to continue for the vast majority of you. From what I've seen, most people who've been close to Nick have released statements. I know Andrew said, I believe, that he's not going to cover it. Civil's talked an awful lot about it, though it's both the emotional and legal side. This is I don't know what it's like for cases like this, because would you expect this to be televised, for lack of a better phrase?
Well, I'm certainly going to broadcast it, so long as I'm physically able through the systems. And I do know that there's also a petition out there to get cameras in the courtroom. Apparently the court is asking for some sort of statement that this is in the public's interest. So that's been going around.
Yeah, I've seen that.
And I know a lot of people have been signing that. That's weird. I'm not sure exactly why that needs to be done. I filed my notice of media coverage for the arraignment. And to my knowledge, that's all you need to do under Minnesota law is file that. So I'm not sure why you would need anything else, unless someone was going to actually have cameras in the courtroom, because I was just going to cover it via Zoom again, which the court seemed to be okay with for the arraignment. But I'll definitely be covering it.
I think it's in some ways very refreshing to hear you say, well, grifting off Nick's suffering. And do you view it as legally informative or as drama content?
Well, if Nick was in a YouTube dispute with someone else, I'm not gonna stream that. The only reason I'm streaming it is because he's actually involved in the court system. So it's an important case in that a lot of people are interested in it. I've put my own cases up with my client's approval. So you could see me running around the courtroom, him and hawing and asking what, if anything, because I believe it's important for people to see more than just the huge sensational cases, more than the Johnny Depp trial or the Karen Reed trial or whatever, these huge sensational cases. It's important to see the smaller cases. And while this has a name attached to it, that will definitely bring in more views. I still think it's important to watch these small. This is a run-of-the-mill drug possession case. That's all this is. Yeah. These happen thousands of times a day. I can go down to the courthouse in Detroit and see 20 of them on the docket, right? In just one courtroom. This is an everyday case that that attorneys deal with regularly. This is the bread and butter of the legal industry, right? Of the court industry. These are a dime a dozen. The only reason it's big is because of the name that's attached to it. And so I think there's some credibility to it. And I wasn't even thinking about, I'm not even monetized on my channel right now. So there's no grifting. You can't super chat me. I'm not making any money off of it. If you want, you can cash at me. But I'm doing it because I like the case. I like the coverage. The subject of the charge is interesting as well. Rekieta's been interesting. I've chit-chatted with him quite a bit through DMs prior to all this. And I have no intention of being as big as he is. So I'm not looking to grow my channel off of it. I just think it's important to cover. It's something that's important to people. I think educational thing. And maybe he'll heed my advice and just get clean and get his kids back and move on.
Do you... With Nick himself, you said it's like a comeback story. Do you think that that's actually recoverable? Because we're not just talking about from the sense that he can get himself clean and everything else, but it's other impressions. I've said this multiple times. Content creators tend to have a couple of pillars to them where their audience will gravitate towards them, and that can sometimes be a particular content thing. Like, you can be known for this one thing. Like Aaron's pillar is he is the guy who got cucked by Nick Rekieta. That's his pillar now. He's done that to himself. But for Rekieta, it's honesty, intelligence, legal coverage, and actually for a lot of people who've known him through the Rittenhouse stuff, traditional values. Well, those have kind of all gone out the window. He's not really got the traditional values thing anymore. His actions are objectively pretty fucking dumb. And, from the legal coverage case kind of end, how much do you trust a lawyer who is had this happen to him in the most public way? So how recoverable really is it? Who's going to trust Nick in the future? Because it's not just this, it's the Montegraph case as well. He's landed himself in a situation where he's been sued for defamation.
He should have settled that case before it got off the ground, by the way. He should have just settled that case. And see, okay, that's a perfect example of where I'm going to stand on the moral high ground of these lofty, noble ideas that since you are a public figure, I can say things about you. And unless you can prove that it was intentionally done with malice, like these lofty ideals, then you can't come after me. And it's like, okay, but what's the practical effect? You're tens of thousands, if not more, into legal fees, and you're tied up in this. It's litigation is stressful. I don't care who you are. If you're being sued or you're suing somebody, it's a stressful endeavor. The value in just buying off that lawsuit is so much more, I guess, valuable, for lack of a better term, than to be fighting it like this, right? So this is a client with principles and money, right? So we love you guys, clients with principles and money, because we'll make our bank on that. But it's usually not good for the client. So he should have settled that long ago before it even got off the ground. Not because he's wrong and Monograph is right, but because it's a cost-benefit analysis at the end of the day. If he had settled that and had gone away, it would not be an issue now. Nobody would be talking about it. But it's still ongoing. And so if he, in this context, in the criminal case, if he, first of all, he's going to shut the hell up for now until this case is done. Once the case is done and everything's resolved, and that's the Child Protective Services as well as the criminal case, once all that's done, if he comes out and he was like, hey guys, I screwed up, I think a lot of people would have a lot of respect for him. Who was the actress that got caught up in that pay to play or like pay for admission scandal. She was on like Full House or whatever. I can't
Oh,
remember her name.
fuck. I can't remember for the life of me. I think I vaguely remember this.
She was on an episode of Curb Your Enthusiasm where they played into it. She was scamming the system. She got like a handicap license plate to park at the country club in that show, and she feigned some sort of illness so she could get a cart when it was walking only on that day. And they played into it where she just played the system, right? And I had so much respect for her for doing that. Now as just a human, the actress, for playing into that whole thing about her scamming the system now than I did before I saw that episode. And I think if Nick played it right, he could capture a lot of his existing audience as well as maybe even some new people. So I think there's a way to do it. I think it's recoverable if you do it the right way.
Do you think lawyers are hurting themselves? I mean, this is one of the things that I said in my coverage. I think I'm pretty open. Like I'll say what the industry sector I'm in is, but I don't say who my employer is. I don't talk about environmental stuff online. I don't debate this stuff because I understand there's an inherent risk involved in my credibility, either with potential future employers or anything to do with, that I could say the wrong thing at the wrong time, or I could say something a bit too edgy, which then if I come across a client, they're like, well, I've Googled you and there's this clip online of you saying this thing. That's a bit weird. I mean, lawyers are a very professional. I mean, again, I somebody said to me, lawyers aren't like barristers in the UK. In the US, lawyers are thought of very differently. But you are putting yourselves out there in a very public way to give these opinions. That again, Barnes, Viva, if they want clients, that is. And indeed the entire legal profession, does that not call into question the judgment potentially in the eyes of the public?
I mean, I guess yes. I mean, it's always something that I'm concerned about, especially when I'm covering local cases, local to me. The last trial I streamed, it was just happened to be a small little case, and I knew the judge. I know the judge personally, and so I streamed it. And I was always sort of like measured on what I was going to say and how I was going to say it. Whereas when I'm streaming other cases that are not in Michigan and not, in front of judges that I know, I feel like I can be a little bit more, I don't know, bombastic or whatever. But I'm not for me personally, my legaling or legal work is sort of speaks in the legal work that I do, and it's separate and distinct from this.
Mm-hmm.
Someone said, because we went down to Tennessee last week and I was riding this little kid's ride, and someone took a video of it and posted it up on YouTube and stuff, and they're like, they're going to think less of you as an attorney now because you're on this like little kid's ride and doing these things. And I said, well, maybe they'll just underestimate me. So I'm okay with it personally. If someone saw that video and were like, oh, this is the guy that was riding the little boy or the little bear ride at Dollywood, we can't take him seriously. I mean, okay, good luck, because I know what I'm doing and I'm okay with it. Now, if the problem is that if a judge sees what I'm doing and a judge thinks differently of me, that would be the concern. So hopefully I'm not big enough that any judges around me are taking notice, because they're the ones that ultimately decide. I don't care about opposing counsel. Opposing counsel can think whatever they want about me, and I don't. I mean,
this is what
they're
Sean,
not the decider.
This is what Sean said. I wouldn't. Sean's like, I don't shit talk people in my own area. I shit talk people in other areas because I'll never have to sit before them. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. It strikes me as potentially short-sighted. I think I'm. Again, I look at people like Kirk and others where it's like, you're really putting yourselves out there. And
I would never dog a judge that's sitting on a case that I'm directly handling, right? Like Nick going after the judge on his case. No, you don't do that. You just don't do that. Lawyer or not, you don't do that. So I was involved with some legislation, crafting some new laws in Michigan a while back, and there's a bunch of fringe people on sort of the fringe of society that sort of got roped up into it. A lot of them will reach out to me and be like, "Oh, I got to show you this case, and I got to do this and that." They're fighting with the judge on a public forum and dogging the judge, and then they wonder why they can't get proper relief from the judge. Well, it's because you trash the judge on YouTube and Facebook, and every chance you get, you're tearing this judge apart. You think the judge is gonna just walk in and say, "Hey, Steve, how you doing?" No, the judge is gonna be pissed at you. Don't piss off the one that's making the decisions on your case. So no, that's just stupid.
So yeah, like I look at kind of like those kind of pieces and how they've fallen for Rekieta. Does that give you any particular pause as to kind of do you worry that like the longer you're doing this, I don't know whether you've had any, it's say you've been around since 2018. I don't know whether you feel like you've ever got dragged into anything, whether it's sort of tarnished your views or changed how you see things around you with the online stuff, like, because there is a distinct difference between the online world and stuff that's going on to kind of like stuff that's in the normal public sphere, right?
What do you mean as far as
do you think that it's like, well, I mean, if Nick had never become a content creator and become massive, he probably wouldn't have ended up in his home, allegedly surrounded by drugs and guns, or being neglectful of his children, or any of these things. And those seem to have played a part. I mean, it's, you're not just a lawyer who is, has clients and cases. You're somebody who has a public presence and fans. You've got people from your community in your chat tonight, in the same way that I've got people here who watch me regularly. I mean, these obviously have impacts and effects on us. Does that give you any pause for thought?
It does, and it did actually. You get it's a boost to your ego, but not necessarily in a good way. I on my last channel, I started trial streams in like March of 2023. Before that, I was doing a little bit of things here and there, but I really tried to like go full force in March of 2023, and I did it for like a year. And I would stream a lot of trials. I would stream a lot of other things. And in February of this year, I streamed Jennifer Crumbly trial out of Michigan. And it was my largest viewers and most interactive. But it was also like the most time consuming. And I had, Runkle and Good Logic and Sean and a bunch of people on my stream wanted to stream with me. Even people, we call them in the like the true crimers, were chiming in and wanting to stream with me and things like that. But then I sort of like stood up one day and realized, like, I don't know where my kids are right now, and I haven't really had like a lot of time to spend with my wife. And when I was talking with my wife, we have, by the way, I married a woman who is like the opposite political spectrum from me. So when I would talk with her, we never see really eye to eye on a lot of political things. But I would talk to her, but after doing this for like a year, I was like, no, I'm right, and there's 1,000 people in my chat that say I'm right. And so you get kind of this ego, and you realize it's kind of affecting your home life. And that's part of the reason why I decided to kind of like retire and step back a bit from it, because I saw that, and it does affect you. And you have to measure that effect in some way, shape, or form. You have to be able to recognize that and step back. And hopefully people are able to do it. It sounds like maybe Nick wasn't so much. He kind of got wrapped up in it. He has way more success than I do, by the way. Like I said, I'm not even a drop in the bucket.
Look, I mean, very few people are. The numbers Nick commanded at one point, the coverage he did. I mean, even without that, actually, the fact that he essentially defined his content bracket is something very few people will ever get anywhere fucking close to. So, I mean, but even as a small creator, if you're like, I don't know, 5k concurrent kind of thing. That is a livable amount where you are going to be making decent money in super chats, donations, all those things. You know, it's the sort of thing it's solid. You've got a repeating fan base that's quite powerful, and you know, a lot of people get to that point and then they'll shut down any like sort of dissenting voices. I mean, you said before, well, I haven't been banned yet. Well, Nick very much is in a position where he has the power to sort of ban people and not really worry about it, which is not, you know, it's not a good thing. I if you look at my previous streams, you'll see some comments like saying that I giggle too much or something like this. Now, many of those comments I had to go in and actively allow because YouTube flagged them for some reason, because I'd rather have the negative comments By
the way, I love the trolls in my chat.
Yeah.
I absolutely love them. I encourage them. I was called, so usually I stream from a treehouse out in the backyard, and so I was called once a homeless internet lawyer, and it was the great. I pulled it up. It was the greatest chat ever. But I like the negative ones. They ground me. They center me. They focus me. They humble me. That's the word I was looking for. But no, you could get wrapped up in it, even with a small creator. And I noticed it in myself. I didn't like who I was becoming, and that's part of the reason why I stepped back a little bit. But I'm not afraid to grift, or tell things like I am. I'm not.
Do you think the other people who are doing tours like Kurt are grifting off this, or do you think they're just sad?
I think Kurt is just sad. I think Kurt is just sad. I don't see a whole lot of people like just outright grifting on it. That's the other thing too. So like before I started streaming, I wasn't a chatter. I was never in chat. I would watch YouTube, of course, but I was never an active chatter. And so when I started streaming, I didn't realize the power of the chat and the effect that the chat would have on a streamer. And so if you've got a bunch of people, especially if you've got a Discord or locals, and you've got your fans or your chatters messaging you saying, hey, you got to cover this, or what are your thoughts on that? It's very tempting to want to please them. One of my issues was I have people throwing me all kinds of cases. Hey, we'd love your opinion on this. We'd love to hear what you have to say about that. And you want to please them, but it's impossible to do everything. So you kind of pick and choose. I imagine Joe and Uncivil and everyone else is getting messages from their chat saying, hey, what are your thoughts on this? Did you hear what this person said about that? We'd love to know what your response is, and things like that. And so they might be feeding into that a little bit too.
That makes sense.
I don't know if you get that or not, but I do.
Yeah, I mean, it's. I go the opposite way. I remember I was going to. In fact, the one thing that somebody attacked my channel for properly was covering an ancient Encyclopedia Dramatica cow. And it's because I was going to go over some Yandere dev stuff, and a load of people on Twitter said, oh, well, you're late to this. You're late to this thing. Why are you talking about it now? And I went, fuck you. You think I'm late to this? Let's talk about something that happened 10 years ago. Fuck off. So I'll actively do things that people don't want to watch. But I wonder if watching people like Aaron and April kind of is telling, because it's clearly, they're not law tubers. Aaron's not a lawyer. He's a radio host who has a YouTube show, and it's quite tempting to go on with Rekieta and get access to that higher viewership. And Rekieta's doing hot tub streams talking about Stephen Hawking. It's a very different environment. I don't know what will happen with the other lawyers, or whether the impacts of covering this case and getting good viewership out of it, because one of the lawyers covering this, and it may be you, it may be one of the others, are going to be sat there with 2,000-3,000 people watching, potentially, maybe more, depending on how this catches on, and depends, when you've got things like other communities who sort of intersect without quite overlapping, things like, in the sector generally. Dick Masterson is right now running around on Twitter quite aggressively sweeping for Nick, and it's very hard to tell whether Masterson is honest, because Masterson's a troll. But, at the same time, when you're sort of running around saying trampolines are more dangerous than cocaine and guns, that's an extreme statement to make,
Yeah. See, are those people trolling? I mean, I don't know Dick Masterson.
I honestly don't know. I don't know Dick Masterson personally. I don't know whether Dick Masterson is trolling or just sweeping. And the problem with Dick Masterson is it is very hard to tell. But it's an extreme level at this point. And the real question is with Masterson, it's like, well, let's say all of this is true with the neglect, with the drugs, with guns being out and easily accessible, with spent cartridge. If that is true, is Masterson's position still, I don't care? Because Dick doesn't care about drug legalization. Dick thinks drugs should be legal. He wants people to have freedom, and that's fine. I think at least drugs should be decriminalized. I think locking people up for taking cocaine is ridiculous, personally. But at the same time, it's like, well, when it's endangering children, when you've got those other elements, trolling aside, actually, do you care? Because plenty of people, and Metica seem to, well, I know Metica, this is one of the few things that he does get upset about.
Well, I hate the idea of drugs being illegal, as so long as it's not hurting anybody. And I would be taking a very different position on this entire case if it didn't involve children. The fact that it's involving children, that there's 5 children in the home, is a problem. Not only for Nick, but for anyone who's going to represent him, or if you're going to do an honest legal assessment of this case. But to sit there and say, the drugs are fine, knowing that there's 5 kids in the house and one is as young as 6?
Yeah, 16.
Yeah.
Before we take any questions, I think we've got one question, which is fine. I hope that's a sign that we've done a good job of going over everything. Is there is there anything left that you sort of would like to say about this case, or the community, or Nick generally? What's your, if you've got I don't know.
Well, I've heard the phrase YouTube eating their own and things like that. It's what we do. I mean, it's what I do. It's what everyone else that I know does when they're covering illegal things, is to break it down from a legal perspective. And at the end of the day, though, we're all human, and people are going to react to things differently depending on, whatever your thoughts are about the situation. There's some people that, I refuse to stream cases now involving dead children. I did 2 actually, and I was like, okay, no, I'm done. I just don't want to do, cases about dead children, because it's hard to make fun with that, right? And so
yes, it's a challenge.
It's a bit of a challenge, yes, to find the levity in dead children cases. So I just don't want to do those anymore. It's not because those cases shouldn't be talked about or broken down. It's just because it's not really my cup of tea. But everyone's different. There will be other people out there that want to stream that sort of thing, and there'll be a ton of people that don't want to talk about Nick because they don't want to pick sides or whatever. They don't want to upset Nick, and that's perfectly reasonable. There's others that don't care about upsetting him. I personally don't care about upsetting him. I feel like if he's truly the Nick that he claims to be, he won't be upset that I'm covering it. But who knows? We'll wait and see. But it's what we do. It's not YouTube or LawTube or whatever you want to call it eating their own. It's what we do, and analyze legal cases. And the reason why I wanted to talk about this case is because of the name attached to it, and it's a fairly mundane, regular thing. Like I said before, he should get probation with treatment and his kids back if he does the things that he's supposed to do.
Do you think the public profile could affect that?
At the end of the day,
would you think the public profile could affect that?
Not with the plea. With because to be frank, as big as Nick is on YouTube, he's not a Johnny Depp. He's not a Donald Trump. He's not, he's not that big, guys. He's big in YouTube. He's big in this realm. But outside of this, I don't know anybody in real life that knows Rick, that knows of Nick Rekieta or knows of his show or anything like that. He's not that big. So even though he's a big deal in the police, the county sheriff made a mention that they know of him, they know of his show, because he's been swatted. That's why they know of him. If he hadn't been swatted so many times, then they wouldn't know who the hell he is. So I don't think his name is going to be that big of a deal to the court. The judge, definitely, because the judge already has one case and he's been talking smack about the judge. But the system itself, I just because he is who he is, no, it's not. He's not that big.
Yeah, no, I think it's one of those where sorry, I'm just posting your link in chat for people because I saw it.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, I'll tag. I should change the site. I'll tag it in the stream as well. Yeah, I think it's one of those where it's not the same as when you've got someone like Baked Alaska going through a legal case, or you've got attention on people like Fuentes. Those are different. Again, Nick has those association, but it is niche internet culture stuff. I think the question is whether if it gets picked up on a wider thing, because I mean this was picked up by Fox, right? Like the article.
Yeah, the local Fox affiliate was. I haven't seen it on any national news programs or papers or anything yet that I'm aware of. It was picked up by the local affiliate, but that's just a local affiliate. So, I mean, a lot of things get picked up. The guy robbing the Walmart probably got picked up by the same news source, right?
Right.
So. That doesn't necessarily mean anything. If it gets wider reach in the media, then it might, for sure, affect his adjudication. If the national media is picking up on it, which I don't think they will, but if they do, that definitely has an effect on judges and prosecutors and things like that. But right now, since it's local, I don't think it's going to have an effect. Local and YouTube only, right? Or whatever the internet calls.
I mean, yeah, no one's expecting a disbarment from this, from what I can see. Is there anything wishful thinking about that, or is it just, what I've heard is unless it's sort of like to do with financial stuff, to do with clients, like the actual like murder or something, the actual line for disbarment's pretty high.
I mean, when people are talking about disbarment, that's like never able to practice law again in the future, ever. And you really have to screw over your clients. It has to be client based in order to really have that happen. If it's something else, there could be penalties, pay a fine, maybe get suspended for a month or two, 30 days, something like that. Maybe. Maybe that.
He wasn't.
That's not realistic even.
I mean, he was investigated by the bar for reading out the names of complainants against him, which were like the CAFL's community trying to fuck with him to be like fair to it. But he was investigated for that, and so I mean, it's these clearly do have impacts in the real world.
They do. I will say this about investigations is that when there's complaints made against attorneys, at least in Michigan, most of the time the bar will ask for the attorney to respond. It's not meaning that they're opening an investigation. They'll say, hey, here's a complaint against you. Would you please respond? And then you do a written response and you send that in, and they're like, okay, no violation. We close the case. That's not like an investigation. They didn't open an investigation. They're like, hey, respond to this complaint that's being alleged against you. So I don't consider that an investigation. But even then, if there is an investigation, the vast majority of the time, you're not leading to disbarment unless you're screwing over a client in some way, shape, or form.
Okay. Well, I think then let's go to questions because we've been going for like an hour and 45. Firstly, for two, across 3 comments. Thank you. I've completely forgotten right name now of the person. Question for God of Law. The warrant states the address but fails to state in-house or residence. A warrant is needed to search the property not only inside the buildings, unless it's on open/ungated field. An ungated area may be searched as a result if a prohibition error law. So would it be reasonable to argue that the address alone doesn't allow access to a building typically? The buildings to be searched must be stated. Not sure what to make of it. The ambiguity seems to go against specific requirements in 4A. I'm not a lawyer, so unsure how it shakes out.
So that's interesting. I didn't look at the warrant that closely. It addresses an address. My understanding is that there's 2 buildings on that address. And that could be an argument that could be made, at least under Michigan law, right? I don't know Minnesota law. Under Michigan law, it needs to be very specific as to the person or place that you're searching and what you're searching for in addition to, right? So you have to say what you're searching for. In this case, it's for drugs, which could be hidden literally anywhere. So if an address is sufficient enough under Minnesota law, it should be upheld. Under Michigan law, I believe there might be an issue with that. But we rise to the level of like, okay, so we have these constitutionally protected rights, which is you have the right to be free from search or seizure without a warrant. And then there's all these exceptions that are now built into the law under this case law. And one of the exceptions is essentially, if we would have found it anyways, then we're going to let it stand. And so, okay, we forgot to say specifically the dwelling on this property. But if we had put that in there, we would have found it anyways. So we're going to let that stand.
What's your general,
that's sort of how it's treated.
What's your general view of this? Like, not as a lawyer, but as a person. I know that's a hard hat to take off, but if you've got situations where you've got somebody who is, let's not say guilty, but somebody who has done something, say, morally wrong. Because, so for instance, in Scotland, which is insane to me, but this is the case. If you're found to have done something morally wrong but not broken the law, they can actually still come up with something and say, okay, well, there's no law against this, but a judge can basically go, this is fucked. You'll be sentenced to this, or we'll charge you with this. What's your general thing?
Wait. So you can be criminally charged for doing something morally wrong in Scotland?
There's a reason Scotland's a fucking mess. I don't know if you're familiar with the Scotland. I don't know if it's still the case. It was, this is going back like 15 years ago. There was an example of it. I can't remember what the fuck it was. But yeah, essentially, judges could basically do things on the fly. But if anyone's like, well, that sounds insane.
Wow.
Like, I don't know if you're aware of Scotland's hate crime bill that was passed recently. Scotland's hate crime bill is so insane and broad that the bill itself is in breach of itself. So it was reported to the police because the bill states that you cannot single out a particular demographic, but the law states white males, which is a specific demographic. So the Premier of Scotland was reported to the police's breach of with his bill by the bill. So yeah, it's yeah. I kind of makes sense why Count Dankula was charged in Scotland, doesn't it?
Oh my god. Well, we don't have laws like that here, although we're bordering on them because we have so many freaking statutes in Michigan, in the United States, that practically anything that you do would be considered a crime. And that's just amazing to me that you could be brought up on moral charges. I got I missed the question. I forgot the question because I was so distracted.
Yeah, no, I know. It's so the fuck it, I did. Listen up. You'll get me distracted. I'm terrible for pivots. I guess my thing is this. You know, people will talk around warrants and things. They'll talk around arrest conditions. But, you know, let's say stuff does get thrown out on technicalities. Is the fact that Rekieta has clearly done these things not in itself an issue that we should kind of be, like, looking at? What is the law for, in your opinion?
Oh, I see. Okay. So, well, the thing getting tossed out on a technicality is really the protection for the constitutional violations. Like, right, we don't have a, we don't have another mechanism to to protect citizens from violations of the Constitution. So let's just say the police had no warrant and they busted in the door and found all this stuff, right? Well, what's the remedy for that violation? Well, it's that you can't use that stuff against them. So when you talk about, throwing things out on a technicality, it means the police violated the Constitution, which we hold sacred because we have these rights, and you can't use that. Now, that being said, I've said this before, that the allegations made in the warrant affidavit, the statements from the preschool teacher at the school, the statements, looking at his internet streams, and then he's driving 8 hours later, or not 8 hours later, he's driving just a couple hours later. All of that is enough to probably sustain a charge going forward. Now, it won't be all the charges. The gun charges will go away. The possession of the drugs will go away. But it would be enough to sustain, say, the child neglect charges. And so he's still going to have the same services that he's going to have to jump through in order to do this. So they'll have to kick those off, those charges off. He won't be able to be sentenced to that because we don't have any like moral things, but there's still going to be enough to convict him of something. And he's still going to have to go through these steps. And to some extent, the process itself is a punishment. Sometimes when a client gets picked up on a charge and they're housed and they get like kind of somewhat high bail and they can't post it right away, you might not want to get them out on bail, because in order to get a plea deal, the prosecutor's going to want to see your guy serve some time. Well, if he's sitting in jail waiting for the trial date, then by the time the trial date rolls around, which is, maybe 6 months, we can go to the prosecution and be like, give him time served because he's already served 6 months, right? Even though he hasn't been convicted.
I mean, this is my understanding is that's what happened with Chris Chan. The reason it was eventually dropped was because even if Chris Chan was convicted, they'd already essentially been time served for it. I mean, is it not like I said this on stream and I stole it from Twitter, but is it not insane that Rekieta could face more time in prison for these alleged charges? The allegations against him than Chris Chan for allegedly having relations with their mother.
I'm not sure if it's alleged anymore with Chris Chan.
So I'm sorry. Are you really sat there telling me you'll say alleged for drug use with Rekieta, but not necessarily alleged for sexual stuff with Chris Chan?
He's been fully adjudicated by now. Chris has been. God, I could go down a rabbit hole with Chris. All right. So, yeah, I mean, we'll say alleged. You've said alleged, by the way.
I've said alleged because everyone's getting sued for everything recently. Okay, I'm more aware than apparently Nick Rekieta, the lawyer, is.
I think it's fairly likely that Nick tested positive for drugs in his system, if he's testing, that I should say. But the hell was I gonna? How do you know where we were going with that? No, but he's so sometimes it's appropriate for the person to kind of go through the punishment of the process, right? And so even if these charges end up getting dismissed against Nick, he's gonna have to go through this process. And again, nobody's talking about the child protective proceedings. That's going to be a process too. That's a much lower threshold.
What is the chances that Nick, let's say, worst case scenario, it's one parent gets clean, the other doesn't. What are the actual is there any chance that Nick's not going to get custody back, depending on how bad? Because I mean, more information keeps coming out and it seems more and more dramatic.
I mean, so okay, if worst case scenario, right? Let's say Nick doesn't get clean, but his wife does, and the Child Protective Services says, hey, listen, you're clean, you're doing great, but we can't give the kids back to you because Nick's in the house. that's essentially going to force her to make a decision between Nick and the kids. And she might end up filing for divorce just to get the kids back. Right? Or somehow force Nick out until he's clean. But because he lives there and there's no court order saying that he can't be there, she runs the risk of not having the kids back. So you need to make that choice at that point, whether it's Nick or the kids. And again, we're just assuming that that's a decision, or that's going to have to be made, right? You would hope she would make the right decision at that point, or vice versa. Nick could get clean and she doesn't get clean. There's a lot of times when these sort of child protective proceedings lead to a divorce because one party is abiding by the terms and the other's not. Or they both go down, because if she's unwilling to remove herself from that situation, the court could see that as furthering neglect of the children, and then she might face further consequences as well as Nick, which could ultimately be parental termination. So they'll terminate parental rights, the kids will go into the system and presumably be adopted somehow.
I mean, I saw...
That's the worst case scenario.
I saw there was... I saw rumors of an additional charge against Kayla, which was for enabling the endangerment of a child. Is that actually... was that confirmed, or was that just a rumor, or was that just misinformation, typo, whatever?
I don't know. I heard that as well, and I heard that just before I came on here, so I haven't dove into that. But that's kind of what I was getting at. If you're enabling that, then you... Why
would she have that charge if Nick doesn't? I know we're theory crafting here, and I know I've been critical of that before, but I am interested.
I mean, if we assume facts that we have no basis for assuming whatsoever, it could be that the factual allegations are, with regard to the drug use, is only against Nick and not necessarily against her. But because she's allowing it to go on, that's why the cases would be different. And that's why, going back to where we started with this, it would be fundamentally impossible for him as an attorney to represent her because they're in different positions.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. It's very depressing. We've got from Murph for 20, thank you very much. What are your thoughts on Nick's unconditional bond versus his wife's conditional bond? Excellent guest and interview, thank you. Oh, my pleasure.
Conditional versus...
what are your thoughts on Nick's unconditional bond versus his wife's conditional? And... I have got that. I will...
Might be the reason for the difference in charges. If she's going to not test positive for drugs, go do the drug testing. Go not possess a firearm. If he's going to test positive for drugs, maybe he pays the $50,000. You know, again, this is economic litigation, right? We're looking at what's the most cost-effective way to litigate this. And so throwing $50,000 at the court on a bond so that Nick doesn't have to test. We don't care about her testing because we know it's going to be negative. And we don't care about her possessing firearms because Nick has them. Whatever, you know, that sort of thing. That could be easily sort of the tactics that are being taken here.
Okay, that makes sense.
That's my tea leaf reading.
Yeah, it's one of those weird ones where I think when, you know, I said this about kind of the, you know, watching people theory craft about it, and I know I'll do that, but then I'm not a lawyer.
I try to be open and honest when I'm making stuff up and just assuming facts that I have no basis for.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one because obviously Nick's growth comes out of the Rittenhouse case as sort of like the first knock, you know, to internet stardom in the broadest sense. But, you know, the reason that was a perfect storm was, well, the misinterpretation, the misreporting, the fact that, you know, the media in some cases may have just outright lied. And then, you know, you've got this thing of, well, we get to the trial date and people were sat there and going, well, he crossed state lines. He shot somebody. He must be guilty without any real understanding of what anyone's fucking rights were or why. You know, the minute we got to evidence in that, it was, I think it was like sort of third, fourth day of the trial, if I remember correctly, it became blatantly fucking obvious that Rittenhouse was innocent, you know. And it's
Well, and wrapping it into Nick now, I mean, these are just allegations, right?
Sure.
But they are allegations, and they're things that have to be dealt with. And we could, craft factual scenarios in order to engage the conversation. But you have to keep in mind that we've only seen the tip of the allegations. We haven't seen anything else. We haven't seen the evidence, right? We're just basing it off of these allegations. But I have a question for you. What do you think the impact on LawTube, we'll call it LawTube for this, is going to be as a result of this from an outsider's perspective?
So I think it's an interesting one. I was talking to another kind of content-y person. I keep using the term content creator, and this is my hobby. I find it pretty fucking cringe. But I was talking to somebody much bigger than me, who's much more well-known, and we were talking about the different things we were, covering at the moment. He said it's interesting because he's like, the thing I'm dealing with is something, it's kind of a continuation of something I've been doing for a while, and it's now my opportunity. Whereas for you, I was around during Bloodsports, I was around during Skeptics, and I was around during when Rekieta came up. And while I've been disconnected for sort of a year, weirdly, I have had in my head for quite a while, I want to talk about Nick Rekieta. I want to talk about LawTube. I want to talk about this sphere a bit, because I love the old law and the old stories. I think the impacts, from somebody, a disconnect from the community, but who's observed it for a long time, could be pretty fucking dramatic. The lines that are being drawn right now are between the people who will care about what the truth is. They are going to be invested. You can see it in the chat tonight. Nick neglected his kids. Nick didn't take care of his family values. Nick didn't take care of his wife in the same way Aaron shouldn't be running his mouth off to this community about his relationship with his wife, because it's not a good fucking look for the audience that he's catering to. There are people who I think really do hold some very traditional values. This isn't like a good or bad judgment. I think that's just what the community looks like. And now I think that split's going to be pretty hard between the people who really care about those values, are genuinely invested in them as Republicans, particularly, and are going to look at this and say, you guys are defending the indefensible. If you're defending Rekieta, I think there'll also be, if Rekieta tries to do a comeback, I think there's potentially going to be condemnation for the people trying to rehabilitate him. And I think there's another side that actually purport to care about these values, but their core thing is they're attached to the content creators. They're attached to people like Barnes, Viva, a particular political narrative, who don't care actually about Nick's kids. They don't give a shit. They care about, well, has the government violated the constitutional rights of Nick Rekieta? And actually, even if they haven't, they will continue. Oh, sorry, bear with me a second. Oh, sorry, disconnected and reconnected. I think I'm back. They will continue to say that Nick Rekieta has had his rights violated, because that is the narrative that they will always hold in these situations. And I think that break is going to be pretty I know that I can see like Nick's a libertarian, not a Republican, but regardless, that I think that's going to be a pretty hard line. The people who are defending him now, those are dyed in the wool, because they're not just defending Rekieta, they view it as an attack on themselves. That's who they're invested in. In the same way with Rittenhouse, there were leftists who could see the evidence. They're not fucking stupid, but were like, but Rittenhouse is still a murderer. I will never believe anything different, because they were invested in the narrative. It doesn't matter what the evidence is. And that's interesting for something like LawTube, which is ostensibly built on debunking bad media narratives, actually.
That's interesting. Yeah, because the whole sort of idea, at least as I've sort of propped up, is let's listen to the evidence. Let's take a look at this from a rational basis. And I've even, in the past, I've had a few streams where I point out specifically how the media got it wrong. And now you've got a group of followers of a YouTube creator purportedly doing that might be a little bit of blind to the truth of the matter, willingly blind to the truth of the matter. Yeah, it is. It's a bit hypocritical, and I mean there is some merit to the constitutional arguments. Like I said, when it's there, it's there. But when you are facing criminal charges, when you are facing not having your kids in your home, the last thing that most people are thinking about is their constitutional rights. You know, most people are thinking about, oh my God, I got to get myself out of the situation. What's the best way to do it? And that's where everyone needs to be thinking. And if you're a good attorney, you should be aware of the constitutional issues, bring them up. But at the end of the day, we kind of know whether our clients are guilty or not. We kind of know what the court is going to be, whether or not your client's going to be convicted, right? At the end of the day, that's the question. If your client's going to be convicted or there's a high probability of conviction, then let's start mitigating the damages as soon as possible. And I think that's just a practical standpoint. You can have your lofty goals and go on YouTube and shout them out in the chat or on stream. But at the end of the day, needs to have a practical approach. So there might be a rift. I like to think that most of the people, at least that I interact with, are above the rift, but I'm always wrong. So who knows?
Well, the question is, it's like, so Magnet said, the most delusional people in America are still covering their faces. If you can't let go of a 4-year-old cold, I'm assuming that's the case, you're out of touch with reality. Yeah, I listen, I meet people who still get facts wrong about the Rittenhouse case. I think a year ago, I met somebody who was like, well, he shot 4 black people. And I was like, you fucking what? You know,
I know.
I
know.
It's, it is crazy to hear some of the things coming out that do about that. I think that the real question is, well, if Nick makes a comeback and becomes if Nick goes from just the law guy to something that's upheld, the people who are on his side then also have a captive audience. And you see this happen with people like Hassan and Vosh on the leftist side, where they've got people who will they've got their little orbiter creators and they all share an audience together because they're all, under daddy streamer. And when that happens, when those rifts happen, they can be very, very tempting. And I think there's a good chance of that. I don't know what Viva's or Barnes's numbers are like, but I imagine with where they have positioned themselves, they are much less accessible. They have an audience that believes what their sort of political positions are and their law positions are ahead of time, but the further audience capture of that, I can't imagine is particularly high for either of them. Not like it was when Viva started,
Yeah, no, I they audience, and I wish they would distinguish. It's fine to have the thoughts that they have and the theories that they have. I wish they would distinguish from reality to what they wished reality was. Like, it's fine to come up and say, listen, I don't think an anonymous report, essentially double hearsay, this person told this person that told the officer who's signing the affidavit, that's double hearsay, should be sufficient to establish a warrant to knock down somebody's door. It's fine to say that. I don't think it should be either. But the reality is that the law says it's okay.
Yeah.
So until we change the law, and this is not the case to change the law, but until we change the law, we have to deal with the reality that we have. And I just wish they would distinguish more between, fundamentally, I don't agree with this, but the law says it's okay right now.
Yeah.
I wish they would do more of that. That's really what I would wish.
I've got
I
one.
won't read your super chats out loud.
Yeah, no, yes, I got from Thal for 10. I looked it up. If Rekieta pleads out for the amounts he had, the average is 21 to 122 months. I'm assuming in prison. I could see him go either way. Due to being so strung out. Addicts don't think straight. I think that's out of interest. If you were his lawyer, let's say it's not Nick. If you had somebody in a similar case, and you were like, "Here's the evidence in front of me, knowing what you know," and they came to you with a plea deal that said you're going to get 2 years, 1 year good behavior, and then you'll be on probation. Would you advise a client to take that case? Take that plea? I don't know, again, whether that's an appropriate question.
Not at this stage. Maybe if nothing changes and we're closer to trial, maybe. But also closer to trial is when the prosecutors start getting nervous, like, oh, we might actually lose this case because we've thrown motions out there. We've limited the evidence that they're able to present in court. We've challenged some things. So you do all that ahead of time and you start chipping away at their case a little bit, and they realize that it's not going to be the slam dunk that they think. Also, they're going to have to try a case. So most prosecutors, not all, but most prosecutors are willing to make plea deals if they don't have to try a case. And so because the numbers on the amounts are so close to that borderline, you can easily get it to, say, a second or a third degree rather than a second degree. Or if your client is staying clean, the judge is going to like that. The prosecutor knows the judge is going to like that. You can even potentially get it down to a misdemeanor, which would have no jail time. So there's a lot of avenues that you could approach as you get further and further along in this case. So right now, absolutely not. You would never take that plea right now. As it gets closer to trial, if you're not able to knock down some of the evidence and prevent some of the issues, then maybe you take it. Maybe it's your best case scenario because you don't want the judge sentencing him to 122 months, right? So, but not right now. Not even.
It's the fact that there are, let's link the drug charges to what they are. I agree with you that rehabilitation is sort of in the interest of the courts and in the interest of everyone. It's the fact that there were the allegation that there was accessible firearms in a house like that with 5 children in it. Even though it says misdemeanor, is that a potentially treated as quite a serious charge because of just the risk of endangerment?
No, the misdemeanors are the least. Now, if the plea was, we'll dismiss the felony, you plead to the 2 misdemeanors, I say take that all day long. Yeah. Because you're not going to get jail time on a misdemeanor like that. Okay. You're going to get probation and services. And that's the child neglect as well. So I would say take that all day long. You're going to get probation. Unless you really screw up, you're not getting jail time on a misdemeanor. Okay. So, yeah. So even though they are, scary guns and neglected. Oh,
don't get me wrong. I think it's, I'm not one of these. I can't believe Americans have guns. I was taught to shoot as a kid, and I grew up around firearms myself. It's not totally the case that Britain has no weapon, no firearms in it. But I just think it's an interesting one there. I have seen in chat, by the way. Yes, one firearm is an AR, I believe. That was allegedly under the bed. So yeah, I think that's pretty much everything. I think that's been a pretty good go over. I know that more's going to develop, and maybe it would be great to talk again as it does, because I think it's useful to have sort of that input. I'll probably still be laughing at quite a lot of it. I'm not going to lie, because some of this is funny, ultimately. It's very depressing.
It's ironic, but definitely. Yeah, I mean, it's right for humor and irony and everything else. It's definitely right for that. Yeah. I probably would have had a few more laughs if I didn't have a panel of people on. But
yeah, I mean, it is. I was thinking this actually. Imagine being sat during your arraignment. You've committed some minor crime or something, and you're like, okay, I'll go to the arraignment. It'll be fine. And then you sit down and you see hundreds of people joining, calling this guy an N-word and telling him to KYS, and you're like, Dick, what the fuck is going on? What situation have I found myself in? Why are all these people here? I mean, that must be.
I know, like I think there were 3 people that were arraigned in between Nick and his wife, and I was listening to it. It was going off in my ear during the arraignment. It was so annoying, but I really kind of wanted to watch it because I wanted to see if people were chiming in, because you can see the screen. Like when you're in those holding cells, you see the judge and you see everyone else, and I can't imagine what's going through their head. Like, oh my God, there's these hundreds of people here during this arraignment. It would definitely be interesting. I've seen a few cases where there's high profile. There was a DUI case that was high profile, news media and everything in, and they walked this guy in who has nothing to do with the case. Well, he's in his shackles and his jail garb and stuff, and they sit him down and they're like, well, what's going on here? And he's like, oh, it's that woman. Oh, that woman. I know that case. He's like smiling to the cameras and stuff. No, it would have been great to watch those people. I just had to entertain my guests.
Yeah, no, it's definitely an interesting one too, because again, it's like, the continuation of the panel format. And you're right, Nick probably would say, cover it. I think it's one of those where it's interesting to see Nick now with sort of like his wife there on the camera. I've never seen his kids on camera, thank God. I don't know if that's ever occurred. I certainly hope it hasn't.
During his streams or during the court hearing?
Just streams and things. I don't know whether he's ever had his kids on things. I mean, I would hope not.
I don't think so.
Yeah, it's one of those where, seeing his wife in that position it must be deeply uncomfortable. And I know I can see Aaron crying about this, on Alex Steinway. It's like, I wish that I put her in this position. I wish I'd done more. And it's like, well, from what I've seen, Aaron, maybe you should have done less, frankly. But I'm sure we'll hear more from him as things develop.
Yes, I'm sure we will. There was talk of Nick streaming this week. Now, yes. I wonder if he's under a contractual obligation to stream. And if he is, I don't fault him for streaming, but I hope to God he doesn't talk about the case.
Well, I mean, it's so, I'm not immune to this. I've been in dramas myself. Nothing serious, but I've had the odd one, and somebody said to me a while ago, well, how do you deal with it? And I was like, well, you'll notice that none of my dramas have ever really blown up. And it's because I'm smart enough that when something happens, I just step away for a few days and shut the fuck up. And then everyone moves on because, they're not major things. They're just like, oh, a couple of people will watch the stream back when you have a bad moment. And everyone has bad moments. Right. Now, with something like this is the sort of thing where you go, well, listen, Nick is a trust fund kid. He has money. Comes from a rich family. I hope he's been smart enough to put money away, because he must have made a fucking fortune during Rittenhouse and Johnny Depp. If he cannot stream, that would be the smart thing to do. The smart thing to do would be to shut down and sort his life out. And I should listen. I'll take the piss out of him, but I share the concern. I don't think Nick's a grifter. I think that's one of the things that's different about this. Normally, when you have people who fall like this, it's because they're grifters. It's because they never really believed anything to begin with. I don't think that's true of Nick. And it does make it sadder, because I think he's somebody who's taken in by the allure of things. And that is a very different thing. And if he does get clean, I think that's great. I'm not one of these people that's like, well, he makes edgy jokes, so I hate him. Like, very insanely fucking hypocritical. I don't even hate the guy. I just think that I think that the hypocrisy that was on display for a while, and the sweeping for the alcoholism, and there's a stream where he's like, this is just a liquid, sometimes you want to drink it, sometimes you need to stop, that's okay, I'm just like, it's watching a man justify live to thousands of people why he's becoming an alcoholic, and that's a very uncomfortable thing. I think one of my friends a while ago actually said, the weird thing about watching Rekieta is that my father was an alcoholic, and he says the same things. And that's, it's something that probably be taken into account, because it is uncomfortable to watch somebody destroy themselves. And I do think that some of the people who've overlooked that for the sake of contract. I mean, I think it's Andrew who was on a stream with him where they said, what alcohol do you have in reach? And he's pulling bottles from everywhere, and they're laughing about it. And I'm like, this is meant to be your friend, and it's clear that he has a fucking problem. Like, it's obvious, and you are. I don't know if enabling it is. I think enabling it's probably the right word, and I think that probably is a bit fucked up, actually. I think that's,
Yeah. Well, and I think it was all fun and jokes, and, there were super chats for shots and things like that. And then all of a sudden it became, this it got real quick. And everyone was still kind of, it's just fun and games.
Which is the sort of thing you'd expect to see out of guys and gals in their early 20s, not people in their, the late 30s, 40s.
Yeah.
I'll have a glass of wine on stream like once or twice, I think, in the last 2 years. I
have been known to polish off a bottle of Prosecco during a live stream and maybe call the court, but that was only once.
I think you have to. Obviously, I smoke on stream, which is not healthy. It's not, I'm not encouraging that, but it's, it is a different. I would argue it's a very different bracket. My energy drink and smoking addictions. But again, I've had people say, the fact that you smoke on stream means I don't watch you, Becca. I won't, because it's, they're like, that's uncomfortable. I'm an ex-smoker. I don't want to watch somebody smoke, or it's just a bad habit to promote.
I watch you smoke, and I get very envious. I miss smoking.
Smoking. Listen, no one likes a quitter.
Yeah, right. I get jealous of smokers. I get so jealous of them.
We're happy people, and also, we're paying.
You know what? Okay, think of the most, like the strongest if you're a non-smoker, think of the strongest craving you've ever had for anything, and then getting that satisfaction over and over and over every multiple times a day. Oh, it's the greatest feeling in the world.
It's and again, addictions. I get addiction. Like, I met people who say, I can quit anytime I want. It's not a real addiction. Or, like, I'm a smoker. I'm obviously addicted to cigarettes. I'm very upfront about this. And if I don't have enough nicotine, I lose my fucking mind. And it's, I'll pre-plan. I'll make sure that I have tobacco ahead of time for when I run out for the next bit of tobacco.
I can't show it on screen, but like, I freak out when I don't have an extra, because I quit smoking cigarettes, but I started the V thing. I don't know what we can say on YouTube anymore.
Oh, you're good. Vaping's fine. Yeah.
Yeah. So I started doing that, but I recently went down to Tennessee, and I didn't realize they don't have the same brand down there that they did in Michigan. And I was driving around for like an hour and a half trying to find like every gas station, every vape shop, trying to find my brand, and I couldn't find it. I was going nuts.
Do you know?
So I understand that.
I spend time out in America every now and again, and the worst thing is American cigarettes are better than British cigarettes.
They are, and they're better than Canadian too.
American Spirit, I actually really like American
I've had
Spirit.
Swedish and Canadian cigarettes and British cigarettes. We have, because we have
rolling
South Carolina,
tobacco's better. Our rolling tobacco's better.
Is it?
Yeah, we've got very good rolling tobacco, because it's the only way it's affordable. I mean, a packet of cigarettes here costs about the same as a bottle of whiskey, so you should probably yeah, it's extortionately expensive. Oh, it's to discourage smoking. That's the reason.
Yeah. Yeah,
So-
I bought a pack of cigarettes in Sweden a couple of years ago, and it was like 3 times the price in America, and it tasted like crap.
I mean, unironically, and I've said this, and you know how people do this, if they ever do that, I'll leave the country. When they ban smoking, and they will ban smoking in the UK, I will leave the UK. I will go somewhere else.
Yeah.
Because I'm just
We'll
like,
welcome you here.
thank you. Well, it's like, it's just, I think some things are just a human right, in my opinion. But yeah, like,
You can always fall back to religion here in the United States. So.
well, yeah, you guys did have prohibition, to be fair. Like, it's not like you haven't tried it first. Just didn't go very well.
Right. Nope, not at all.
um,
They'll never be able to. Biden tried to ban menthol cigarettes. Oh my God, that goes so bad. Just the mention of it. You got so much backlash from that. They're not going to ban anything here. They're going to make it extremely ridiculously expensive.
Well, that's what they've done. Well, they've done it here, and they've reduced smoking by about 80%. I think it's higher now. I think it's like 86, 87. But you know, vaping's kicking off.
Yeah, I was gonna say. I bet it correlates with the invention and distribution of vapes.
Well, I mean, the amount of money they spent on getting people to quit is insane. I think one of the basic things is this, and this is how I look at stuff. You should have a basic understanding of things that are unhealthy, and this is true of alcohol, drugs, smoking, but ultimately, if you're not hurting other people, you should be able to do things to your own body. That's, you know, I am me. I'm not property of the state. And right. So long as I'm earning money. Always. Yeah. I think the
problem is that when you do impact other people, then we run into a battle of the rights, and the government is always, you know, won't somebody think of the children sort of approach, and that's always an excuse. I mean, I know they tried to ban, and I think in California they successfully banned smoking in cars if there's children in the car, and things like that. And so they'll always try to use someone. They banned smoking in restaurants and bars because of the unknowing waitresses that were exposed to it, even though they knew where they were applying to a job, you know?
Yeah.
So, I don't know.
Well, yeah, I think that, well, again, it's one of those where it kills a lot of people. I don't think I'd argue differently. But so do many, many, many other things, you know, and the rights, you know, I'm a big believer on rights of the individual, even as someone who has to live in Britain. But I think this is also why things like, well, I mean, I don't have to, but you know, maybe I'll go live in Norway.
A better European country, you might have to cross the Atlantic.
Norway's pretty good. Norway's pretty good. But yeah, no, there's a couple of places kicking around I'd probably move to. There are places in America I'd certainly go to. Probably not California.
Probably not.
Probably not. But you know, it's an interesting one where you're looking at. Do you think that things like LawTube and educating kind of your audience helps or hinders? Do you think it gives people a false confidence? Because you've got people like the sovereign citizens, or the people who'll end up, or what's the term, where you go and basically do constitutional checking, where you'll be like,
yeah, that's sovereign citizens, or
yeah.
I don't think it. I think my experience, anyways. So my experience has always been, you're innocent until people prove you guilty, until the state proves you guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. When we're talking about criminal cases that I covered,
sure.
And I think the vast majority of the citizenry in this country are sitting down. They're members of juries, and they're sitting down saying, tell me an interesting story about how this guy did this bad thing before I vote him guilty. Almost like it's a 48 Hours or a Dateline episode. And I see that as a fundamental problem, because our country is based on the idea that you can have, well, first of all, let's start with the premise that government is a necessary evil. And even if you have a corrupt legislator that's passing a really bad law, and a corrupt prosecutor and a corrupt judge, you still have to get it past 12 everyday citizens before you can convict somebody. That's the idea behind it. But when the citizens are sitting there saying, "Oh, he's charged, he must be guilty," before they even sit in that jury box, that's a fundamental problem. And our system is great, but the people that are making it up right now are a problem. And what I've been trying to point out in my trial streams is we really need to listen to the evidence. Is that really sufficient if the prosecutor is standing up there in closing arguments saying, well, maybe he did it like this, or maybe he did it like that, or maybe he transported him here, or his phone was off, so we don't know where he was? is that really beyond a reasonable doubt if you look at that objectively? And so that's what I've been trying to point out in my legal streams, in my trial coverage. And I think it's making at least the people that I interact with disheartened, and concerned for the society that we have. And so in that respect, I feel like it's doing good, at least from my observation from what I've been doing. In fact, when I was in Tennessee last week, I had somebody come up and he's like, you know what? I've always been kind of pro cop, and I
Mhm.
still am. But watching your trial coverage has really called into question some of these prosecutions. And that's where we should be. If we have a doubt, it should be not guilty, right? And so that's how our system is. And that's what I've been trying to do with my programming. I can't speak to anybody else, but that's really what I've been trying to do. And I see more and more people that I do stream with or that I interact with going that route. And the people that are listening to them and sort of following them along, I see more and more comments about, is that really enough? Like, this is a horrible person and this is a horrible crime, but is that really enough? I don't think it is. And that's where I would really like to get us to. And to the extent that I'm doing that, I see it as a good thing.
Do you think things like jury nullification are interesting topics?
I love the idea of jury nullification. I understand why the government doesn't want you to talk about it. But I think it's a good idea. I think the jury should be allowed to do it. And I think I think the defense attorneys should be able to argue it, should be allowed to argue it. And I do think it's a good idea.
Because I mean, there was the case during the Prohibition era where a gangster murdered his wife. He was obviously guilty, and the jury were like, she obviously deserved it. And then they just declared him innocent during the trial. And there's also, I think there's a case, I don't know whether it was a hypothetical, of somebody who was arrested and charged for telling people going into a courtroom that jury nullification existed. And they struggled to charge him because he was being charged with telling people that you could nullify a jury. So how do you explain that to a jury without pointing out the reality that they can just be like, you're innocent, and there's no ramifications for that? So
yeah, no, I'm a huge proponent of this whole, like, it's illegal to do, and if you mention it, it's grounds for a mistrial, and you could even get disbarred if you bring it up. I hate that idea. And in fact, I engaged in jury nullification. The one and only time I sat on a jury, and I didn't even know what I was doing. It was pre-law school. We had a guy. So the defendant was walking across the parking lot, and what the officer said was a known drug hotel. And so he stopped him randomly and said, come over here. I'm going to pat you down. And the guy struggled a bit. They ended up finding drugs on him. And then when he got in the police car, he kicked out the cop's window. And so he was being charged with resisting arrest, drug possession or drug paraphernalia possession, and then destruction of police property. And so we got back in the jury room and we were like, listen, that could have been me walking down the street. My car could have broken down. I don't know what this place is. Why is a cop coming up to me? You know what? Not guilty on the possession, not guilty on the resisting. But once you're under arrest, maybe don't kick out the window. So we found him guilty on that one. And essentially what we did is jury nullification, because he was guilty of all those things.
But you were like,
we thought it was bullshit
yeah.
that the cop even stopped him. Right. And so I think it's an appropriate thing for the jury to do. And the jury is allowed to do it, but you can't argue it and you can't talk about it. If the jury happens to stumble across it, then so be it. I think that's bullshit.
Well, that makes sense. I've got 2 super chats. From 10 from Thal. I got it, guys. Rekieta's perfect defense. All he has to do is the Daryl Brooks defense. Just say subject matter jurisdiction, and he wins. Boom, problem solved. It went so well for Daryl. I mean, that's one of the few things that I actually streamed. I was really fascinated by the Daryl Brooks case. It was amazing to watch. I was going
to cover his second trial, and then he took a freaking plea. I wanted him to testify. I wanted him to testify in his girlfriend's trial, and he took a plea. Coward.
I mean, God. Yeah, it was God, that was a shit show. Incredible. And jury nullifications were into our Constitution and MD. I don't know where MD is.
Maryland.
Maryland. There we go. And that's from Weird Color Guy. Thank you for the 5. That's interesting. Yeah, I think. I think topics like that. I think that's where LawTube, and this is why I started watching it. It's why I started watching Rekieta. It's why I started watching Viva, because it is interesting to hear these breakdowns. Especially as somebody who's, not a lawyer, and I know it doesn't apply here in the UK, but it's interesting to hear lawyers dissect cases, and it's again very interesting to see the outcome of somebody who's made this successful, made it that he was right on the cusp of a real world mainstream stardom, really.
Yeah.
And that's not to say it can't be there for him in the future, but you could see that path.
It's going to be a long road back. I talk about like the second act or whatever for Rekieta. It's definitely going to be a long road back, and I don't know if he'll ever get that mainstream media coverage like he did, because I think the opportunity might be gone.
Do you think the association? Now, I want to be careful what I say here, and not because I want to be careful what I say. I just want to be careful how I phrase this, because obviously I'm a Metica fan. When I did my last stream on Rekieta, I was very open. This came from the farms. It's a resource for a lot of content creators, and I think we're all honest about that. I'm not one of these people who's like, the farms murder people. It's a fucking crazy thing to say. But nonetheless, the fact that you've got people like Rekieta associating with, people like Metica, who are old school 4chan trolls, like they have long histories of taking the piss, and other characters, is a weird position for LawTube to be in. It's because it's, whatever you think of who these people are, the public impression is that they are significant counterculture figures. People like Sargon, Quartering, they're not part of the mainstream. Is that association weird when you're talking about what is essentially presented as educational content?
Yes. I think his show shifted. I think it pivoted, though. Nick himself has said this isn't a law show. It definitely started as one, but as of late, it really hasn't been a law show. Like, he covered one of the first times I was on with him was the Shabusiness trial, and he streamed the trial. I was surprised he streamed the trial because I didn't see him doing trial coverage much anymore. He was talking about politics and all these fringe things, and that's fine. He had an audience for it. But that's why I didn't really watch him much, because he was talking about all these other things that weren't really law related. So his show pivoted, and although he was whoever deemed him the Pope of LawTube, that wasn't his content. That's not his content. He doesn't talk about law stuff. I mean, once in a while he does, but he really doesn't. He streams late for me, so it's hard to watch him. But when I first started streaming to the point where I actually had people in the chat and associating me with other law tubers, I did watch a lot more of his content, and they weren't really law focused. That was a year ago. They were about everything else, but some political stuff, some shenanigans with other YouTubers or something like that. Monograph was thrown in there, but I don't think it was legal commentary. It wasn't a law show, and it hasn't been for a while. So is it weird? No, because it's not a law show.
But is it weird for the rest of you who are still doing the law stuff? I mean, if you were turning on the 9 o'clock news, I mean, you sort of expect to see someone like me talk about Encyclopedia Dramatica or 4chan or whatever, or Twitter. But would you, if you turned on the 9 o'clock news and they were like, and this evidence has just come in from Kiwi Farms, would you think that was fucking crazy?
Yeah, definitely from mainstream media. But what they would do is they would say sources say, they wouldn't identify as Kiwi Farms. So let's just get the terminology right.
Sure.
But no, it would it would be weird. But then again, you have shows like what is it? The gossip show. Oh my god, I'm drawing a blank. The gossip shows like you get on early after or late afternoon coverage. Just talking about gossips and celebrities and things like that. That's what you would expect. I'm sorry.
Oh yeah, no, I was just agreeing with you.
Oh yeah, so that's what you would expect from that content, and that's kind of what Rekieta turned into. If you wanted to hear gossip and shenanigans about other, just politics or other weird streamers or something weird going on Kiwi farms or something going on with some comic book publisher, maybe some drama between YouTubers, that's where you went. That's what Rekieta turned into. It wasn't a law channel. He had a stream in the afternoon 2 weeks ago at noon where he was actually talking like substantive law stuff, and it was like, oh my god, what's going on? What happened to the world? That he's streaming at noon and talking about substantive law stuff, because that was outside of the norm for him at this point. So it was just the format shifted. It's like when your rock station turns into country music.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, that makes sense, and I know that is a change. I suppose.
TMZ. Oh my god! Thank you, weird collar guy. TMZ. That's what I was trying to think of.
But yeah, I suppose it's one of those things where, for those of us who sort of observe from the outside, and when we talk about LawTube, it feels like it's not. I don't follow Unciviled, but the fact that Unciviled is talking about being on Nick's stream and saying he's uncomfortable with a racist comment made about Michelle Obama. Or a comment he felt was racist. He's doing this while playing video games, and it's just like, that does feel weird from somebody who's like essentially a lawyer. It's a weird setup. It's like, hey guys, let's go through the trial stuff. By the way, I'm playing Civ 4. It's like, wait, what? That's
okay. It is weird. It is weird. Like, so when my channel got shut down, I used it as an opportunity to bifurcate my channels. Mm-hmm. Because I would do things like I would play video games once in a while, or obviously I'm on a boat right now. So, and I have a wood shop, and I have a stream we do on Saturdays every once in a while. It's Lego, Law, Life, and Libations, where we interview YouTubers. By the way, I'm going to invite you, and we build Legos at the same time. And but it's like a weird hodgepodge of streams that I have, and I was like, all right, so my channel's down. I've got a few other troll channels in the background. Let me just recreate those. So I have the Lego Law channel where we do all the Lego interviews. I have this channel, or not this channel. I have my God of Law channel where I do all my legal commentary. I have a woodworking boat channel, because it's weird to have all of that in one place. So yeah, you're right. It's weird to have like Uncivil is doing a video game stream while talking about law stuff. Now, I'll talk about Nick or various legal things or the Karen Reed case while I'm in my wood shop, working on something, because people in chat will ask about it. But it's not the appropriate place to do woodworking on the God of Law channel, right? So, it is weird when you put it in that context.
Because like I love video games. Like I build Gunpla. I quite like Gunpla. Like mech.
I don't know what that is.
They're kind of like Japanese mech robot things. They're like they come as kits, and like almost a bit like Warhammer. You can snap them together and stuff.
Sure.
And Lego's great. I've actually got a few kits that I've been eyeing up on Amazon, so that might I like. Yeah, it's fun to have this thing. I'm quite when this channel started with the person I work with called Jenny. We've been really dedicated. It's like, well, we won't do anything that's not this to do with sort of internet culture, law, archaeology, drama. It's very focused. And some people are like, well, when are you going to do a gaming stream? And I was like, well, when I find time to go to do it on Twitch or something on my old channel, if I get back to it, because there's a bit more dedication there. Just very quickly, and from Thal, thank you for the 5. Uncivil is a nice guy, but he's incredibly whiny, and I can't stand him because of that. He gets butthurt about everything. It's annoying. I mean, I'm just reading the super chat, but yeah, it is.
Well, I mean, everyone has a different personality,
Sure.
and I love his brain for the constitutional stuff. He knows more about constitutional law than I could ever hope to ever learn, and he could just pull it up. So I like his legal analysis on the constitutional stuff. Outside of that, everyone's different. You know, Kurt's got his personality. Everyone's got a different personality.
What's your so with people like Joe who seem I don't know, I haven't kept up with him at all, but I obviously remember when he started being on Rekieta back in the day. I mean, he seems to have grown significantly. And is he a bit more sort of dedicated law channel? Can you see him covering this?
Yeah, in fact, I believe he did do a stream either today or yesterday about this. And yes, he has been covering it. Maybe he didn't do it. Maybe I just saw him on someone else's. But his content is primarily legal or political. He's been involved, or not involved, but actually involved. He's been involved in the Trump trial. He's actually filed a petition on behalf of media sources to ungag the president in that criminal case. So he was actually directly involved, but he's been covering a lot of that. And his stuff is all law or politics, adjacent to law.
Do you think things are going to?
In fact, he did a Lego stream.
Well, that's see, that's always nice. It's nice. It's a nice crossover. Do you think because it's an election year, and I believe Trump is running, we're going to see a lot more of that kind of political content out of LawTube?
From certain LawTubers, yes. Not from everyone. Like, I'm probably not gonna do anything political, just because you're either in one camp or you're in the other. It is what it is. But
oh, might have lost.
Yeah, I feel like there's
Okay.
gonna be a lot more and all that stuff. Oh, did you lose me?
I lost you briefly. I think the bridge boat went under a bridge.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no worries.
Also, you're right.
But,
thank you for the 5. Joe covered it for an hour on his own, and then Nate and Civil and Joe did a stream together over it. Thank you, pal. Yeah, I think it's.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one to see, like, how that'll develop. And, you know, I've noticed this, you know, there's a lot less hype over the election now than there was in 2020 or 2016, particularly less in 2016. You know, and people are going to, you know, I think politics is a dying content brand, actually. I think people are kind of sick of hearing about it. I can't say I blame them. But yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see how that unfolds. I think I've lost you again. The joys of streaming from a boat. Just a quick thing. Well, wait for Dave to reconnect for a second. Thank you all very much for watching. Do like and subscribe. I hope this has been informative and interesting for you all. As for me, I quite like the breakdowns. They're quite good. Is anyone voting for Trump? I mean, I can't. I'm British. Not that I would. I don't know. I'd probably vote independent. Just for the fun. I like to throw my vote away. The Boeing hit score. Good lord. This isn't British internet. This is boat internet that's doing it. I think Nick should have worried about Child Protective Services being on him for the foreseeable future. No one is really talking about that. I think it's an interesting point. Yeah, I think it's a difficult one to talk about because I think an awful lot of people don't want to talk about the kids involved. Can't say I blame them. It is very difficult to kind of do that content. I mean, I don't like doing stuff that involves people messing with kids. It's fucked. I'm just being like, you're fine, pal. You're fine. I hope that I think we've covered all the next stuff. I definitely want to see more out of this. We'll give Dave a little bit of time. I think. Ooh, it's just me now. What I will do though is I will repost Dave's link for those that do not have it. Ah, you're back.
My God. I don't know what happened. All of a sudden, my laptop was like, nope, we're not going to connect with any internet source for a little while.
That's
I'll let you
fine.
know when.
That's fine. We were saying I get British internet connection, so that's even less fun for me because occasionally they're just like, nah, I'm gonna let you talk to the Americans.
I have two hotspots and the Wi-Fi here, and like my computer wasn't connecting to any of them. So it was a computer issue. I don't know what's up.
But yeah, I think we'll see what happens with political content. But I think it's a dying content brand. I think people
I do
are sick
too.
of it.
I don't see a lot of joy in talking about it, and I see less joy in watching someone else talk about it.
One general question that I had for you is my understanding. How much do you know about Barnes's history?
Not much at all. I mean, I do know he's been involved in some high-profile cases. He's more of a salesman than a litigator, from what I understand. He's like either behind the scenes or a hype man kind of thing when it comes to cases. But that's all I really know.
Do you think that do you think that what's happening with him now is what's a good way to put this? Him hyping for like his own profile again? This is the way for him to sort of get back on top a bit, or is he also
Rekieta? Like with the Rekieta issue, or just in general?
Yeah. It's a way to be back because
The Rekieta issue, I don't think he's making any friends with it, and I think his analysis is kind of dumb from a practical standpoint. I mean, from a general standpoint, my problem with Barnes goes a little bit more personal. The first case that I covered, that I streamed the trial all the way through, was the Zachariah Anderson trial. Zachariah Anderson, in my opinion, was wrongfully convicted. Not because he's innocent, although I believe he's innocent, but from a evidentiary standpoint, I think he should not have been. No data, no video, no witnesses, no DNA, no, like, we have nothing except a conjecture, right? That's not enough to convict somebody. And
oh, is it me that time? Nope. That's fine. I am quite interested. So we will wait for that one. I think I'm still live. You can tell me if I'm not. I think I'm good. I saw my EBS do that weird reconnecting thing. Am I just doomed today? I'm just doomed. I think I'm good. I hope you talk about this. Yeah, so I'm not super familiar with this case. But I am definitely interested in it. Right. It's all right. Take your time. Take your time. We hear and see you. Rosa, that's fine. Damn you, Bridge. True. We can fill you in on Zachariah Anderson. So I've seen a bit of that case now. I'll wait for Dave to reconnect. It's the Bridges there attacking you. Yeah, everyone else is being oppressed by the government. I'm oppressed by Bridges. She's somehow more British. Zach had the same judge as Rittenhouse. Really? That's very interesting. I'm gonna. Yeah, you know what? Fuck it. I'm interested. Dave, are you back?
oh my God, can you see me?
No, but that's fine. That's fine. Take your time. We're in no rush. It's all good.
This thing. All
There
right.
we go.
Here we go. All right, now I'm back. Oh my God.
So Zachary, so what I was
saying was,
so what I do understand is that apparently he confessed to his cellmate and his cellmate testified. Is that correct?
oh, sure, yeah. That was the testimony. Although the circumstances regarding that testimony were ridiculous. So yeah, that's the one piece of evidence.
Okay.
but what I was saying is that Barnes promised to help the family. There was a big push for the law to for Law Tube to get involved. Legal Vices covered the case and streamed it. We were all supportive. We did a bunch of fundraisers for the appellate work. We pointed out a lot of fundamental legal issues as well as factual issues with the case. And Barnes, so Viva interviewed Zach's brother. Barnes said, "Yeah, I'm going to help. I'm going to get involved behind the scenes and help with the appellate work," and then just sort of like ghosted everybody and didn't really live up to the hype that he put out there. And so that was the first time I was like, I'm not sure about this guy. So that's my sort of personal issue with Barnes.
I remember something during the Rittenhouse
time. If you're going to do something, do it. You know?
Yeah, I remember it being weird during the Rittenhouse stuff. So he was very involved with Rittenhouse, and then he wasn't involved at all. It was very odd, and it has sort of inspired me to go back. And obviously with Viva, you know, it was interesting. You know, again, Viva's got some parallels to Rekieta. He was a, you know, family man, traditional. He, you know, you'd see his family a lot in the blogs. It seemed very, you know, he seemed like a normal guy just talking about the law. And now he is increasingly looking like he lives in a storage container somewhere with long hair, potentially reading an anarchist cookbook. It is a dramatic shift, you know.
Yeah, I like Viva. I've been on some panels with him. I haven't done anything one-on-one with him. I have no problem with Viva, you know, specifically or anything like that. I like most of his takes on legal issues. I'm just yeah, so he's just teamed up with Barnes and they do their thing. But usually whenever I'm on a panel with Viva, it's just him. It's not him and Barnes.
Yeah, I mean, it's again, like when I say these things, I don't mean it in a, you know, an assault or shade way. I'm not trying to draw a judgment. I'm just more drawing an observation of where Viva's at.
Okay. I'm still here. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you. You're good. You're good. What I will say is that I think we're at like 3 hours, so if we call it here, I think that's probably good.
Yeah, I turned off my camera just to hope that it would.
Yeah, no, it's fun. I think, look, I've enjoyed this. Hopefully you have as well. You know, I'm sure we'll, as the next stuff goes on, I'm sure we'll talk more, because it is interesting to hear that perspective. And obviously I can't give the legal breakdown because, again, not a lawyer. So, you know, hopefully that's helpful.
That's what I'm here for.
Yeah, that'd be good. Okay, well, look, let me dip out the call, and then I'll do close up for the stream, and I'll drop you a message afterwards.
All right, sounds good. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, no, it's been a real pleasure. Thank you for coming.
Take care.
Cool. Cheers. Bye.
Cheers.
Okay, let's get a camera on for me. There we go. Oh, God. Am I really that far over? That feels wrong. That's weird. Feels weird. Oh, that was really good. Cool. $10. Found LawTube. Love learning about our legal system and all aspects of trial law now. Favorite legal movie, The Verdict, which is similar to Nullification in a way. I thank you, Ruby, for the 10. I don't think I've seen The Verdict. I'm trying to think what my favorite legal movie is. I quite like Devil's Advocate, actually. There's a couple of good legal movies. Liar Liar, good legal movie. Nick is a lawyer, ask him. I don't think Rekieta Law's coming on Cope and Seethe to talk about things, guys. I don't think that's gonna happen anytime soon. I will keep covering this. For those of you who haven't seen me before, I obviously am somebody who laughs a bit more at random shit. And, you know, if you can enjoy that, but I'm also happy to do, you know, a proper conversation things. And I think that helps because I you know, I like getting to the bottom of things. I'm trying to think who the hell to send you to, because I have like 3 streams to go and watch now. Right after this, is this over? Is all of this over? Has everything ended? Is there anyone for me to read it? I was like, oh, it'll be an hour. Fuck. Who's around? Who's around? Who am I sending you to? He's in the Cope of Cope and Soothe. Yeah, My Cousin Vinny. My Cousin Vinny, great fucking movie. Dioria is ended. Dioria's ended. That's what I was gonna send you to. Right. If that's the case, I don't think I'm gonna raid you to anybody. Right. Okay. I am normally back. My normal streaming days are Thursdays and Saturdays. I am probably going to take tomorrow off because I have been streaming so much. But if something interesting happens, I'll come back. I will be doing more things. I know Masterson is going to be on the Kill stream talking to Stardust, which could be quite interesting on this. And I think that there are a few other things going on with things. Is Diesel live? Diesel's going live. I'll raid you into Diesel. That's nice and easy. Thank you, Priestess. Yeah, thank you all so much for all the support and everything else. I appreciate it. If that works, that'd be great. Thank you very much. Marston, Diesel's going over the Wendigoon Praise of Shadows drama, which is pretty interesting. I will see you guys next time. I'm not going to give you an outro song or anything. Thanks very much, and be good to each other and yourselves. Laters.